Morning, everybody. My name's Ewan Mochrie, Master Trainer of NLP. Now, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a minute, but first of all, let me just talk a little bit about the structure of what we're going to do this morning. So probably going to last maybe about 2.5 to 3 hours, depends on, how many questions we get and that sort of thing. Now, this format isn't massively interactive. The way that you can interact is by putting questions into the Q&A. And when we get to the end, I'll take questions at the end. So I won't actually look at the questions until the end. So it's not a massively interactive format, but you can take part by asking questions, put them in the Q&A, and I'll deal with that towards the end. We'll also have a break, probably about 11 o'clock. It depends where I am through the content, but probably break around about 11 o'clock. Now, I'll only break for about 5 to 7 minutes, so it won't be a massively long break, but hopefully long enough for you to nip to the toilet, get yourself a drink, or whatever you need to do for a few minutes. But that will probably be around about 11. So what I'm going to do through the next few hours, I'm going to tell you a little bit about NLP, so that you can understand what it is and maybe how it can help you and maybe help people around you or other people that you know as well. Now, most of the way through, I'm going to show some slides. So I'm going to see if I can manage the technology and share those with you now. There we go. Seem to be managing that so far. So again, if I just tell you a little bit about myself. So as I said, I'm a master trainer of NLP. Now, for the last about 16 years or so, I've been running about 10 to 12 NLP practitioner trainings a year, 3 master practitioner trainings. And since 2013, we've been doing 1 trainer's training a year as well. Now, in between the training, I do coaching work with individuals, sometimes with organizations as well. And I'm also the author of the book called It's Time, which is about consciousness and the nature of reality and that sort of thing. Now, you may have had some contact with a lady called Joanne Binks. We've been working with Joanne since we started this, and I worked with Joanne before as well. So that's just a little bit about ourselves. Now, obviously, I'm going to tell you about NLP and what NLP is and how you can use it and that sort of thing. Just before I get into all of that, though, what I want to have a little discussion with you about is emotional intelligence. Now, some of you may have come across the idea of emotional intelligence at work. So this picture just gives you a sense of what it's about. Now, sometimes emotional intelligence gets called EQ. Now, that's sort of like your emotion quotient, sort of a measure of your emotional intelligence. Now, it's using that in a similar way to when you think about IQ. So IQ is your intelligence quotient. How smart are you? Can you manipulate 3D objects in your mind and that sort of thing? Now, you can do an IQ test, and if you get an IQ over about 126 or something, you can join Mensa or something. Now, you may think it's IQ which determines how successful you'll be in life, but it's actually your EQ, which is a stronger determinant of how successful you'll be in life. So the higher your EQ, the more successful you're likely to be, whatever you're doing. I'm not just talking in financial terms, it's whatever you happen to be doing. Now, EQ is something that you can learn and you can develop. So over the years, I've developed my EQ. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. I used to work as a chartered accountant. Now, I had reasonable EQ, but it was probably a little bit lower down before I started doing the study in NLP that I did. So it's possible to improve your EQ and thereby improve your success in life. And one of the routes to doing that is learning about NLP. Now, I'll talk about the quadrants that you can see on here on this picture in a minute. But basically, the reason I'm putting this on now is NLP can help improve your emotional intelligence in all of these areas. So I'll have a chat through this now then. So as you can see, it's divided up into self-awareness, what they call on this slide social awareness, self-management and relationship management. And again, it's further subdivided into the ideas of personal competence. So that's your self-awareness, your self-management, social competence, that's social awareness, relationship management. And it's also about recognition and regulation. So you get a sense of what it's about, but I'll go through them all individually. Now, Everything in life, everything starts with self-awareness. You can't help somebody let go of a problem they don't think they have, because they've not got a problem. If there's something going on with you, you can't change it unless you know about it. So self-awareness is, first of all, having a sense of what's happening with you emotionally. What's your emotional state? Um, could you do an honest SWOT analysis on yourself? So could you assess your own strengths, weaknesses, threats, opportunities, that sort of thing? Um, it's also about, are you able to take feedback? Can you take feedback, and do you have a slight sense of humor about yourself? Don't take yourself too seriously. Now, I know we all kind of like to take ourselves seriously from time to time, but can you actually sort of recognize that, wow, you're not perfect, but you're sort of a bit of a work in progress, sort of thing, and not take that too seriously. So that's what self-awareness is about. Now, it says on here social awareness. Now, that often gets described as awareness of others. So if you've got a sense that there's things going on with you, well, maybe there's stuff going on with other people. Are you able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes? Can you have some empathy with somebody else? Get a sense of where they're coming from? When you listen to somebody else, when they're talking about something, do you actually listen to them? Or do you just wait until they stop talking so that you can start talking, and then you talk about the nearest similar thing that's happened to you that they're talking about? So, it's just really extending the idea that, there's things going on with you. Well, there's things going on with other people, and that's okay. It's that sort of realizing. When I first started learning NLP, I was amazed that everybody didn't think the way that I thought, because I thought the way that I thought was the way that everybody should be thinking, obviously. But then I started getting a sense that, other people were doing things differently, and that was perfectly okay, and it was working well for them. So that's a little bit then of what they call on here social awareness, social competence, awareness of others. Now, in the blue circle at the top under regulation, it's got self-management. So it's back to yourself now. Now, self-management is, are you able to control more of your sort of destructive emotions? So we all have emotions, and emotions is part of being human, and it's fine. We get emotions like anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, these sorts of things, just to name a few. Now, when you're getting that inside of you, how are you expressing that? Do you really let it all out and express it, or are you able to recognize it and mitigate it a little bit and manage the emotional outbursts that you have, or not? And again, you can learn this. I've got better at doing this, and I can see other people have too. It's also about being organized. Being organized in life, being organized at work is not quite as difficult as a lot of people make it out to be. You have a calendar that you put your appointments in, and you use it, and you look at it, and you have a to-do list of the things that you've got to do in your life, and then you prioritize them. You can do that. And then once you've got a to-do list and you prioritize them, you then do the things that are on your to-do list. It's not really massively complicated. The doing of it sometimes is complicated, but being organized isn't actually that complicated. Now, self-management is also, do you have sort of a positive outlook on life? Is your glass half full? My glass is very full at the minute because I've not had a drink yet, but is your glass half full rather than half empty? Can you look at the positive side of things? I'll talk a little bit more about focus later on, but one of the things I want you to begin to realize is that where you put your focus and how you choose to look at things is your choice. Now, again, easy for me to say, not so easy to do some of the time, but I appreciate that. Now, the final segment that we've got on here, quadrant, if you like, is about, it says relationship management on here. Another way of thinking about that is leadership and management of other people. So it's like, think of it like this. Once you've got a sense of self-awareness, once you're able to manage yourself, once you can appreciate other people, then that empowers you. That gives you all the tools so that you can maybe inspire other people. You can maybe see where their development needs are in a business sort of context. You can lead other people. You can negotiate conflict within a group. There's a conflict in a group at work or something like that. You're able to get the parties to see other people's perspective, get them to chunk up to a slightly higher level to see that they have common purpose and that sort of thing. And then you're able to bring people together. So this sort of conflict management, relationship management, inspiration, leadership management, it's all these sorts of things that final quadrant is about. Now, many people in business want leadership skills, they want management skills. Now, as I sort of hinted at a minute ago, where you start those, you have to start with self-awareness, you have to have awareness of others, and you have to have self-management. Now, if you do those three things, and the detail behind them, those three things is then giving you the ability to lead, manage other people. Now, as I just reiterated, the reason I've just put this up at the start then is to give you a sense of, this comes out of psychology, but the reason I put this up is to give you a sense of what NLP is offering people. NLP can help with people manage through all of these quadrants. But it gives you a sense then of a frame, a sort of a box to sort of hold some of the ideas that I'll talk about later on. So that's why I was just talking about it. Now, another concept, excuse me, another concept which I want to just chat you through is the idea of change. Now, this is a change model from psychology. I'm not saying it's the only change model. I'm sure there are maybe other ways you can change, but this is a model. Now, it's one that I quite like. So I'll talk you through this in a sec. Now, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at here, the horizontal scale is time. So it starts, which way around you're looking at this, but it starts at A and it moves across to new A. So time runs forward in that direction. And now the vertical scale is about psychological effectiveness. Now, what psychological effectiveness means is, I'll maybe talk about this later on a little bit, you'll see, but we all carry with us this sense of what we can call a model of the world. So you've got a model of the world, and your model of the world is what you believe about yourself, what's your own story about yourself and your capabilities, and about the broader world, the world out there, outside, what's going on in that world and what's it like, and those ideas about what the world's like on the outside and what you're like, they sort of mesh together. So it gives you this sense of, well, if I do this, this happens in my world. Or if I do this, this happens in my world. So that's psychological effectiveness. So when that's working, you're further up on this scale. So your psychological effectiveness is better. So things are moving more smoothly for you. That's what psychological effectiveness, that's the sense of it anyway. Now, if we start, certainly the way I'm looking at this, if we start on the left-hand side, it says A. Now, the other thing, sorry, before I go through that, the other thing to think about this is this could be you as an individual. This could represent a group of people. So it could be a family, it could be a business organization, it could be a country, it could be the world, right? So you can look at this at all sort of different levels. Now, A is the point when everything's fine. Everything's going along smoothly. You've not really got particularly many challenges, not ones that you can't overcome. You know what's going on in the world. You kind of got a good sense of alignment and confidence about yourself and what you're doing and that sort of thing. Everything's fine. So you move along, and as you're moving along, everything being fine and that sort of thing, you then hit B. Now, B is where one or two doubts creep in. It's like things were working before, but they're not now working quite as well as they were before. Now, you might think, what we need to do is we need to get back to basics. We need to go back to A. We need to go back to where things were working. And the reason that it's not working now is we're not doing things well enough, fast enough, efficiently enough, or something like that. So you try and recapture the sense of what you feel is now missing, but was present previously in A. You aim to recapture that. In an organization, they may, a company, they may introduce a new product, new and improved, better than our old stuff we used to sell, but it's really just the same stuff, but in different packaging, that sort of thing. That's often sort of the initial sort of response when you hit B. Other senses in an organization, maybe people start questioning the direction the business is going in, or maybe one or two key people leave and that sort of thing. That's the sort of sense. If it's a relationship thing, you might sort of just begin to question, is this really working for me? It was working before, but that magic seems to have gone, somehow. Was it there at all? It's that sort of thing. Now, what happens then on the journey B to C? So you're going B to C now. Things get worse. So as you hit B, they're just beginning to get worse, but going B to C, they get worse. So your sense about what's going on with you and what's going on, and when you think about things, what's going on in the world, I seem to think this way and I do this, but then I don't get the response in the world that I used to get before. Oh, what's going on with that? And things just get worse. Maybe it's a relationship, you just argue more and more, and that sort of thing, or an organization, the sales are just going downhill. Nobody seems to know what to do about it. So it's that sort of thing that the journey B to C is about. Now, when you hit C, C is obviously a turning point. So you're going to go down B to C, and then you're going to go back up again. Now, C is a turning point. Now, actually, at the point of C, at the bottom, if you like, you know what the problem is. You know what caused the problem. You know what you need to do about the problem. But until you just turn the corner, you aren't doing anything about it. Now, usually, certainly for an individual, usually the thing you need to grasp hold of as you turn the corner is that there's one person who's going to sort this out, and it's you, or me, whoever you. It's you that's going to sort it out. So that's usually the thing that you need to sort of grasp hold of as you turn the corner and move up from C then. Now, the process then C to D, you can think about this as you're sort of creating new sort of ways of thinking, maybe new strategies, ways of approaching things, or new beliefs, or if you want to get, into the neurosciences, you're making new neurological connections or something. That's what you're laying down as you move C to D. And you're making the changes, you're making improvements. And finally, D is the point where that's stabilized. You finally stabilize that change. Now, also notice on the diagram that D is higher up than where A was before. So you were effective before, but now having gone through that change cycle, you're now more effective at D. Now, one of the things about D is D inevitably leads to new A. So you might go through the whole process again. But the idea with this is that over time, even if you're going along, you go down, you go up, and then you go along and you go down, you don't go quite down as far as you did the first time, and you come up into a higher place. So all the time, it's that sort of improvement. So you end up here in life, even though you started off down here, even if you did this all the way. And that's kind of what we go through quite a bit in our lives. I know that I've been through this process. As I said, I used to work as a chartered accountant. I've been through divorce about 20 years ago as well. So, you can get a sense of, noticing these things in your life. But life goes on. And what you're aiming to do is make this sort of progress up here. Now, the good news about personal development is you're never done. And the bad news about personal development is you're never done. It's an ongoing sort of continuous process. Now, one of the reasons that I'm doing what I do today is because way back when I decided to change career, the reason I changed career, just tell you this, is maybe it was midlife crisis, who knows, coming up to 40, and I was thinking, accountancy was okay. Some bits of it which I quite liked and that sort of thing. Obviously, it pays you a good salary and that sort of thing. But I thought it's not really what I'm passionate about. That's not really, what really gets me excited and that sort of thing. So I wanted to bring what my passion was and my work into alignment together. That's what I wanted to do. And it took me a while to figure this out. I guess it was always there, but it took me a while to figure it out. The thing I was passionate about was personal development and self-improvement and that sort of thing. So that's what led me into NLP. Now, another thing which was kind of working in the background with that as well is I look at the world outside. It's over there, the world outside. I'd look at the world. It's also over there too. But anyway, I would look at the world outside, right? And I thought, I think the world is going through change. Now, I know it changes all the time. I get, you can look at old pictures from the past and say, oh, look how different, look at the hairstyles and that sort of thing. So it does change all the time, but I got a sense that there was profound change going on in the world. And I just wanted to sort of be a positive part of that change. That was one of the things that I was seeking. Now, I've always said that on training, since I started doing training, most people just thought I was a bit, a bit nuts, really. But then in 2016, Leicester won the Premier League title, and everybody was a bit, didn't expect that. And then also in 2016, Britain voted for Brexit. Now, don't know what your political views on it, but that was certainly a surprise to quite a lot of people that this country would decide to move away from its largest trading bloc. Seemed a bit odd, but fine. And then later that year in 2016, America voted to have Donald Trump as its president. Now, since then, and obviously we've been through some interesting stuff over the last 18 months or so as well. Since then, people are beginning to get a stronger sense that, I can really see that the world is going through some profound change at the minute. So that's why or one of the reasons at least, and for bring my passion and my career into alignment. So that's why I do what I do. Now, my guess is you're tuning into this today for a reason. So what I want you to do first of all is see if you can get in touch with your reason for tuning in. And the thing about this is, if you can get in touch with your reason for being here, my guess is there's a reason behind the reason that you're here too. See if you can get in touch with that. And if you're able to get in touch with the reason behind the reason that you're here, I guess there's also a reason behind the reason behind the reason that you're here too. See if you can get in touch with that. Now, what I'll talk about next is the applications of NLP. But just before I go through that, I am going to go through what is NLP in more detail. But just let me give you sort of the highlight sort of way of thinking about it. NLP is a codification of how people think and produce their behavior. So it breaks down the structure of how you think and how you produce your behavior. Now, it's quite a fundamental level of that. So inevitably, it gets used in a lot of different places. Now, sometimes until you know about NLP yourself, you didn't know it was being used in this place. But when you know about it, you can then see that. I've had lots of people on training say to me that I always thought this guy that I worked for at work was, he was really sort of good and really effective and that sort of thing. But, I didn't know sort of, how, why, or whatever. And then I learned that he's done NLP training, and then I did it, and I can see what he's doing now. It's that sort of thing. So I'll go through the applications now, but that's the sort of the highlight is what you want to think about it. It's a codification. It breaks down the structure of how people think and thereby, from their thinking, produce their behavior. So let me just pop these up then. I'll go through them one at a time. But, NLP gets used quite a bit in business. Now, you'll see as we go through, this coaching is one of the applications, obviously, of NLP. So it gets used in that sense as well. But it also gets used in sales, marketing, and general management. There's in sales, for example, NLP just pulled out, and it's something NLP's not invented it, it's just sort of pulled out the structure of it. There's sort of 5 things that you do in a sales process. You ask questions, you build rapport with people, you as you're asking questions, you build rapport, you find what their need is, and then you link the value of what you've got to their need, and then you close. It's that sort of thing. Now, just about all sales processes go through that. And NLP, again, can help with each of the different steps in that process. And the marketing aspect is NLP can help you understand how people are thinking. It can help you understand about values and language and things like that. And it also just helps in general management. Negotiation is another area that it can help with too. Now, I'll put both of these up together because I'll just chat about the 2 of them together. Now, I'm not going to go through sort of masses of the history of NLP, but I'll give you a little bit. It basically started in the early 1970s, and it came from the modeling, the careful study of successful therapists. Now, it was also influenced by a group of people who in the States in the 60s were known as the human potential movement. Now, the human potential movement had two basic premises. The first one you may not agree with. You don't have to. Well, you don't have to agree with either of them. But anyway, the first one was that people are positive. So it's the assumption that even though it doesn't always look like it, totally appreciate it doesn't look like it, but basically people are positive and they do things for positive. They think they're going to get something positive out of what they're doing. So people are positive. And the other, which is easier to agree with, shall we say, is that there's more potential to be awakened in people. So it was kind of those two principles. And there were various people who sort of influenced the human potential movement. Some of the people who were part of that, NLP then studied and that sort of thing. So it started from a therapy, from Gestalt therapy, as it happens. Now, Gestalt's a German word which we don't have an equivalent for in English, but it's about sort of it's looking at the whole thing, and individual parts sort of represent the whole, and things like that. One of the ways of thinking about it is take an emotion, for example. You will have had the first time you experienced anger or something. You won't remember it consciously, but you will have experienced anger for the first time, and then you experience more anger, more anger, more anger, more anger, more anger. Now that's like a string of pearls, and it's all collected together. Now when somebody makes you angry, now you're accessing all of your gestalt about anger. So it's that's one way to think about Gestalt. So Gestalt therapy was like looking at sort of the whole sort of thing of individuals. And NLP studied a chap called Fritz Perls, who was like the father of Gestalt therapy, and also studied a lady called Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist, not so well known now, but she was quite well known before. So it came originally out of the idea of therapy and change work, because obviously if you're doing change work with people, it's important that you understand how people think and produce their behavior. So it comes out of psychology in the first place, if you see what I mean. Now, when it comes to therapy, there's lots of different ways of doing therapy. You can see a psychiatrist. Now, psychiatrists are doctors. You could see a psychologist. You could do CBT. You could do counseling. And now NLP kind of fits into that too, sort of crosses over the psychology, CBT sort of area, but it's not psychiatry. I don't work with diagnosable psychiatric conditions or things, or people who are a danger to themselves or a danger to other people. That's so even in the coaching. Now, sorry, let me just explain. So when you think about coaching, then a lot of therapy doesn't have to be like this therapy, but a lot of therapy looks at the past. So it all sort of dwell in the past and try and sort the past out. Now, some of the difference then with coaching is the coaching is much more future focused. So they don't dwell on the past in coaching. It's more about the future. Now, some of the crossover, and there is a little bit of crossover, is even to do coaching, you need to understand the past, because it's easier for you to empathize with other people, understand where they've come from and put yourself in their shoes if you understand their past. But it's about just understanding it. It's not analyzing it and breaking it down. Now, some of the reasons for somebody's problem may come from the past, but the reason is in the present. So it's dealing in the present and it's then moving forward into the future. So there's not a complete clear line between therapy and coaching, but kind of is, if there is one, it's to do with the fact that coaching is more about the future, therapy is more about the past, although coaching reaches a little bit into the past just to make sure you understand somebody. Now, NLP is very extensively used in coaching. Even people who do coaching without training in NLP, they kind of end up reinventing some of the things that NLP is already codified and structured. And coaching is more about releasing potential within people. So it can be used it is used quite a lot in business. Now, sometimes management in business, you tell people what to do and that sort of thing. Now, which is fine, that's perfectly acceptable. Now, with coaching somebody in a business context, you're helping them find the answers. Now, it can be slightly longer process coaching somebody than just sort of traditional management, maybe, but it's more, you get more potential out of them, and you get this better long-term benefits and that sort of thing if you use a coaching approach. So it's used a lot in business. Obviously, you get all sorts of different coaches. You get relationship coaches, you get life coaches. You can get transpersonal coaching. You can get CBT coaching. You get all sorts of different types. Nevertheless, there's common themes that run through all of them. And again, NLP speaks to those themes. Now, another place where NLP gets used, now again, I'm just going to put two of these up together, is high performance and sports. Now, sports is an example of something which I would describe as high performance. So what high performance is I'm going to talk about the conscious and the unconscious minds shortly. But the idea is you have a conscious and you have an unconscious mind. Now, in a high performance situation, what you're aiming to do is through training and practice, you train your unconscious mind to be able to do certain things. It could be acting, could be presenting, it could be sports, could be something in a business context. So you know how to do something. Your unconscious knows how to do something. And then the idea with high performance is that you then need to replicate the thing that you know how to do when the pressure's on. So you then have to do it when the pressure's on. It's that sort of thing. So sports is obviously an easy sort of way of appreciating that. People train and then they've got a big game. If you're a Manchester United supporter, which I'm not, but if you are, there's a big game for them coming up tonight. They have to perform then under pressure. I will be watching the game though, but anyway. So it's that sort of thing. Now, obviously, you get lots of different sports. I mentioned Joanne that I work with. She used to play volleyball for England. So you can get all sorts of different sports. You get golf. You get skiing, Olympic sports. Team sports, that sort of thing. And again, NLP is used in coaching people in those areas. And also, as I said, high performance can be, it could be musical performance, it could be acting, could be presenting, it's these sorts of things. So again, NLP can help reduce some of that conscious interference. What you want to do is when you're actually doing something where, again, it could be like sort of doing surgery or something like that. You might know how to do it, but when you're doing it, you don't want any conscious interference whilst you are doing it. Now, the last point on here is personal development. Now, the way I think about NLP is there's lots of different things you could do for personal development. What I would say is NLP is the best technology, if that's the right word, in personal development. Now, a lot of things in personal development that get talked about, things like mind mastery. It's actually managing and controlling, in a positive sense, your mind so that you can get results that you want and that sort of thing. So that's fundamentally what personal development's about. Now, you can do lots of things for personal development. Again, that's doing sports can help people. If you've got children, one of the ways you can develop them, improve their self-belief, their self-worth, their confidence, is if they perform in sports or music or acting or something. These things can all help because they get a sense of being able to achieve and pushing themselves and learning things and that sort of thing. So there are many different activities you can do and ways you can think about personal development. You can have goals that you go and achieve. I had somebody on training several years ago who is into big goals, and he took part in a ultra marathon in the I think it was the Arctic, and I remember it was the Arctic or the Antarctic. It's probably the Arctic now. And he won that and that sort of thing. So so you can do something like that and you get an achievement, or you could do something a little bit smaller. You could sort of walk up a big hill near you or something, and if you're not really into that sort of thing, if you do it, you get a sense of achievement from that. So there's lots of things you do from a personal development perspective. And again, because NLP is breaking down behavior and thinking, it helps with personal development. Now, personal development, I think, is a lifelong thing. I think it's one of the things, personally, I think it's one of the things that we're here to do to grow into more of who we are. Personal development's about having more of what you want in your life, less of what you don't want. It's about becoming the best version of you that you can be. And again, NLP helps with it. So I'm going to go through now in a little bit more detail what NLP is. So as I said earlier on, NLP is a codification of how people think and produce their behavior. Now, there are other ways of thinking about it, which I'll share with you in a minute. Now, we just break the letters down. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Now, the neuro, in NLP, we talk about mind things. So we don't talk about, oh, my amygdala's doing this, or my brain stem's doing this, or whatever. Now, we're not saying it's not. Those things are there, obviously. But those concepts aren't, although, neuroscientists can look at them, they're not accessible in everyday life, and it's not the language that we use in our lives. So we tend to use the language of the mind. Now, the language of the mind is things like conscious and unconscious. It's things like memories and decisions and beliefs and values and that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what NLP is working with more. Although obviously that's connected down into the brain structures. They're just useful labels for us to use rather than talking about my amygdala is not feeling so good today or something like that. Now, another thing with the idea of neuro is just recognize and understand that it's your unconscious mind that produces your experience of the world. Now, this is what neuroscientists say, that it's not, you don't see the world the way it is. You see the world the way you are, not the way the world actually is. And I'll show you a little example of this in a minute. But everything you experience, your unconscious mind creates what you experience based on your previous experiences and the current context that you're experiencing something. So it takes all of your, and it's doing this unconsciously, you're not aware of it. It takes all of your prior experience and it shoves all of your prior experience, takes the current experience and the current context and shoves all of that through the prior experience to create what you're actually experiencing. Now, take vision, which is what I'm going to show you something on in a minute. You think, we all think, we don't think about it too much, that we see with our eyes, right? Yeah, fine. Close your eyes, you can't see. Yeah, light comes in through the eyes, but it's the brain that structures what you actually see. So you maybe had the experience of seeing something in the distance. It's only until you looked at it for a little bit longer or you got a little bit closer, it changed into what it actually is rather than what you were seeing it as. All of us have a blind spot in our vision where the optic nerve connects to the back of the retina. Now, none of us see that. There is a way of doing it. I can't remember what it is actually, but there is a way of seeing it. But you hold a pencil in certain places. But we don't see this blind spot because our unconscious mind fills it in for us. A lot of our lives, we don't see anything at all because we're blinking, but we kind of, unless you pay attention to it, you can pay attention to it. But if you don't pay attention to it, then you just kind of don't notice it. So what I'll come back to the linguistic and the programming in a minute, but let me just show you this sort of optical illusion type thing, just to illustrate this point for you. Now, this is a psychologist who's done this. Now, this is illustrating the idea of you perceive everything based on prior experience, current context. So your prior understanding of, well, let me describe what you're seeing here first of all. What you're seeing here is a bit of a like chessboard or a checkers board. And there's a green cylinder on it, and there's a light source coming from the right-hand side, which is creating shadow across some of the chessboard. Right? Now, your prior experience is you understand what a chessboard is. You've seen it before, checkers board. You've seen it before. You understand it's alternate black and white squares. You also know what a light source is, and you know what a green cylinder is, right? Now, what you're doing is you're putting all of that together now, and your unconscious mind is using this information to create what you perceive. Now, the point about this is the square that is labeled A and the square that is labeled B are actually the same shade. Now, I've seen this loads of times, right? And they don't look like the same shade to me. They won't look like the same shade to you either. But that's the point with this. Now, so that you can see that they are the same shade, I've got two other slides just to show you. So let me just show you that. Now, if you look at this one, this has taken two blocks of color, which are the same as A and B, and it's just drawn them down like that so that you can see that A and B are the same. Now, when I look at this, A and B still don't look like they're the same to me. B still looks a little bit lighter than A does. I quite understand why if I look at it, but that's the sense that I get. Really, the only way that you can see that A and B are the same is if you take all the context away, which sort of disrupts your prior experience, if you see what I mean. And then you can see that A and B are the same. Now, I'm presuming when I look at this that the guy who created it's not messed around with the colors. I didn't create it, but that's the point it's aiming to illustrate. It's this whole idea that you experience things based on your prior experience and the current context, and it happens unconsciously like that. We're not aware it's happening, but we're doing it through all of the senses, though, all of the time. So that's just a little bit about sort of the neurology. We think we see an objective world, but is there really an objective reality? Now we go back to linguistic and program. We're going to touch on language again shortly when I talk about the NLP model of communication. Language and linguistic it works a little bit like this, right? You have an experience. So you have an experience, and what you do is you create an object of the experience. So you separate yourself from the experience. Now, again, this is happening unconsciously. You might not be aware of this, but you have an experience, and it's this dualistic sort of thing. I am having an experience of this, right? And then what you do is you use your language to describe what you experience. Now, if you experience something which you didn't have language to describe, you would have quite a lot of difficulty in describing your experience if you've not got the language for it. Now, some of you may speak more than one language. Now, what you can find is if you speak more than one language, you may actually notice that the way you interpret the experience is different in different languages. Now, I only speak English, so I've not got direct experience of this, but this is what I hear people saying on trainings. And that now your experience will be unique to you of it. Just because somebody says this, you may experience it like that. I'm not saying it will be exactly the same. Another thing about language to be aware of is we think we know what words mean. So if your partner says that they love you, you will have your meaning for the word love. Now, your meaning for the word love may be nuanced, maybe slightly different to your partner's meaning of the word love. So you can get problems in communication because one person has one idea of what word means and somebody else has got another idea of it. There's also a tribe in the South America. I can't remember what they're called, but the tribe in South America. Now, this tribe doesn't have words for numbers. So it has a word for one, and it has a word for a little bit more than one, and it has a word for a lot. So you'd be pleased to know you can't do maths in that language, not very well anyway. And if you've got 4 children, it's like, how many children have you got? Well, you've not got one. You've kind of got a bit more than one, and that's all them over there. It's that. So, but you can't say 4 because you don't have a word for it. So this is what happens with language. Then language is it's the description. You use that as a description of your experience. It's one of the phrases which gets used in NLP is the idea of the map is not the territory. Another way of thinking about it is so that the map is the language and the territory is the neurological experience. Now, another way of thinking about that analogy is the food in a restaurant. Now we can go to restaurants again. The food in a restaurant isn't the menu. So the menu is the linguistic description of the food, and the experience is the actual food. Now, there's many a time you've been to a restaurant, I would guess, I certainly have had this experience, when you read the linguistic description of the food, and then what comes doesn't quite match in your mind with what you're expecting, because you've got your interpretation, and whoever cooked the food and wrote the menu, they've got a different interpretation. It's that sort of thing. Now, it's just have awareness of that. Where you want to get to as you use NLP more is you want to get to the point where you use words which work for other people, not necessarily the words that just work for you. Now, what the programming aspect of NLP is about is recognizing that there is an order and sequence of what you do in your head to produce your behavior. Now, I'm going to talk about this later on today. You can tell something from how people move their eyes about what the thinking is. You can't tell exactly what they're thinking, but you got some idea about what they're doing. Now, I had a guy who was a trainer, came on training, and he says he gets anxious before presenting. So I said to him, how do you know it's time to get anxious? Now, asking that question, I'm asking him to tell me a bit something about his process, what he goes through in his mind to produce the feeling of anxiety. And he says, well, first of all, he said, I see people in the room. And as he said that, he put his eyes up like that. Now, as we'll see later on, that tells me that he's remembering seeing people in the room. I see people in the room. I said, what happens after that? He moved his eyes in line with his ears and he says, well, I hear myself saying, hi, it's Steve. He was called Steve. And then I said, what happens after that? He put his eyes down here. Now, if somebody puts their eyes down to their left, your right as you look at them, but their left, it means they're talking to themselves in their head. So when he did that, he didn't say anything there. But I know he's talking to himself in his head. So I said to him, what do you say to yourself? And he said, oh, I say to myself, this is going to be really rubbish. Not the actual word he's used, but it's a family show. So he said, I say to myself, this is going to be really rubbish, he said. And then he got the feeling, well, feelings are over here, of being anxious. Right, okay. Now that I know that that's his process, I can do things to help him change that process. In a similar way, I had a lady on training who had a turbulence phobia. So she feels turbulence on a plane when she's on a flight, and she feels fear, which is a phobia type reaction. So I said to her again, how do you know it's time to do that? She said, well, I feel the turbulence. I said, fine, what happens after that? And she went down again into what we call in NLP, just a bit of jargon, but we call it auditory digital. She went down to her left, down here like this, with her eyes. So again, I know she's talking to herself. I said, what do you say to yourself? She says, I say to myself, we're all going to die. Now, if you're wanting to create a phobia around turbulence, that's probably a quite good thing to say. But if you want to get rid of it, you need to change that. So the way of changing it that I got her to do was I got her to say it in Mickey Mouse's voice. We're all going to die, Pluto, or something like that. Now, what I'm doing is I'm changing how high she's actually saying it. So it's not so easy to take it seriously if you say it like that. Now, that I didn't know that would just get rid of the phobia when I suggested that she do that. But that did just get rid of the phobia for her. Now, I didn't know that was going to do it, although it's one of the things we could do it, didn't know that would just be enough. And it's just, again, changing some of the qualities of what you're doing inside, and that can change what your behavior is. So that's what the sort of the programming aspect in NLP is. It's recognizing that things happen with an order and sequence. Behavior happens with an order and sequence, is that sort of thing. So that's kind of what NLP is about. Now, there's a couple on this slide here. There's a couple more ways of thinking about it. So this is what I'll just go through here for you. So I'll put, actually, let's just do them one at a time, shall we? So the first one says it's a do to, not a do with. Now, you can make things look like a do to. If you've ever been to a hypnosis stage show or something, it'll look like the hypnotist is doing things to the other people. Now, like with NLP, similar with hypnosis, although people don't always say this with hypnosis, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. People do it to themselves by following instructions as it happens. So you can't actually go around and do this to other people. You can do things which build a sense of rapport, you get a sense of trust, so it's easier to help people change, but you can't make people do stuff. Now, the next thing says it's NLP is an attitude and a methodology that leaves behind a trail of techniques. Now, some of that attitude is curiosity. You're curious about the world. What's going on in the world? You're curious about other people. Somebody's creating a behavior. You think, well, how are they doing that? How did they get to where they are today? Now, it's this sense of curiosity that you have about the world and other people drives the sense of exploration and questioning and that sort of thing. So that's part of the attitude. Another bit of the attitude is flexibility. So now, before I talk in detail about flexibility, let me just mention ecology. So ecology is the study of consequences. So if you're making any change for yourself, or if other people are thinking about change, you've got to help them think about what the consequences of that change for them and for, family, friends, extends out, that sort of thing. So if you're doing anything in life, doing any bit, you've got to think about the ecology of it before you do it. Having said that, so that goes first. Flexibility then is about there should be nothing you're not prepared to do in life, provided it's ecological, to get the results you're looking for. I've had lots of people phone me up about coach. Well, when I say lots, it's under 5, but I've had a few people phone me up and say, I'd like to do some coaching, but I don't want to do any hypnosis. I don't want to be clucking like a chicken. Now, basically what they're saying is they'll do lots of things in their life to change, but they're not going to do that. So, this is the idea about flexibility. You should really be prepared to try things and have a go and that sort of thing. There used to be an advert, and I appreciate it's just an advert, but there used to be an advert in the UK about a woman in the supermarket with her son, and the son wants some sweets in the supermarket, and mum says you can't have them. Son has a tantrum, screaming and shouting, that sort of thing. So what mum does, she has a tantrum too. Now, I appreciate it's just an advert, but son is immediately shocked into, oh my God, mum is doing exactly what I can do. Often children do these things because they think that if they do that sort of behavior, mum will have to do something to stop the behavior. She'll be mortified, she'll give in or whatever. But if you're able to demonstrate to other people you can do exactly what they can do, then that can disarm the behavior. So there's lots of things in flexibility, but you always have to remember the sense of ecology comes first before it. Now, the methodology is this idea of modeling. Now, it's the sense that anything anybody else can do, I can learn how to do it and do it too. Now, totally appreciate there's physiological stuff involved. If I was wanting to run 100 meters faster or at all or whatever, I could model Usain Bolt. Now, I'm never going to run as fast as Usain Bolt because there's a physiology thing involved in it. So I'm never going to run that fast. So I can't replicate his physiology completely, but I could replicate some of what he does with his body to improve what I do. So if anybody's doing anything, you can find out how they're doing it and you can do it too, or at least your version of it. If you see, it'll never be exactly the same, it'll be your version of it. So that's where sort of NLP came from in the first place. This idea of breaking things down, and somebody's doing something, well, maybe I can do it too. It's that sort of thing. Now, that attitude and methodology then leaves behind some techniques. So there are various techniques to help people change, like you can let go of emotions, you can change beliefs, you can get rid of habits and things like that, which then come from all of this understanding. Now, I talked a little bit about sort of subjective and objective behavior before. So sometimes NLP is described as a study of subjective experience, how it affects your behavior. Now, what I could say is science is the objective study of subjective experience. You can never step completely outside and observe something. Now, we still do science. I'm not saying we can't do science. Obviously, we still do science. But you just sometimes need to have this appreciation of the fact that even if you're doing something scientifically, you're doing it inside you still at the end of the day. There is, not in all branches of science and not all experiments, but sometimes you get a little bit of confirmation bias where you tend to get the results that you're expecting to get. There was a study done many years ago in Harvard again, although the other thing wasn't Harvard, but in Harvard, where they took some psychology students and they said, so we've got a bunch of rats, right? 2 groups of rats. I want you to do some testing with the rats. Now, the rats we've separated them over years of selective breeding, is what they told the students. Years of selective breeding. We've got this bunch of rats, group A, obviously, which are maze bright, really good at running mazes. And we've got group B, who are maze dull, terrible at running mazes. Took the rats that were the worst at running mazes, bred them together, and when they could be bothered and that sort of thing. And then we took their also and bred them. These ones are really bad at running mazes. These ones are really good at running mazes. Go and do some testing and see what you find, right? So they've framed the students to think these are good and these are not so good. Student go away and do the testing, and what they found was these ones were really good and these ones were rubbish. And then what they told the students afterwards is we don't do any selective breeding. We just randomly took the rats out of a pool of rats that we've got. So this is something, I'm not saying you get it in all branches of science all the time or anything, but it's something which does exist, is this idea of confirmation bias. Sometimes you get the results that you expect to get. Anyway, so this again what NLP is about, study of subjective experience. Now, this is quite a strong statement. I don't think I would totally agree with this, but it's, to an extent, I would. It says a realization that our words do not describe the world we live in, but rather they determine the world we live in. Now, as I said earlier, the words you've got to describe something do determine what you've got. But it's quite a strong statement. But it's the idea, if you don't have the language to describe what your experience is, you have difficulty, explaining what your experience is. So, your word, your language can affect things about how you perceive the world, how you understand the world. Is that sort of? And sometimes, you can get misaligned meanings. You can think this word means, you think on the surface it means this, but it's actually connected to something else, which means something completely different. So, you can get problems with language in that sort of way. Okay, now I touched on this a little bit earlier on, but what I'll talk about now is your conscious and your unconscious minds then. Now, work with a very simple model in NLP. You have a conscious mind and you have an unconscious mind. Don't get into subconscious and that sort of thing. We would just regard that as unconscious. And so that's a simple model: conscious mind, unconscious mind. Basically, I'll go through a little bit of detail on the next couple of slides, but basically your conscious mind is dealing with everything that you're aware of, and your unconscious mind is dealing with something else. Everything else, sorry. Now, not something else, everything else. Now, you can bring things from conscious awareness into conscious awareness. So before I mentioned it, you probably weren't aware of your feeling of your legs against the chair or your back against the chair, on the assumption you're sitting down. But that can come into your awareness. Or your breathing. I've mentioned your breathing. Where was that sense of your breathing before I asked you about it? So your conscious mind is dealing with what you're aware of. Your unconscious mind is dealing with everything else. Now, what you've also got on this slide, you've got the line between the two, and there's the thing that says critical faculty. Now, your critical faculty is the sort of the analytical bit of your thinking. It's the thing that sometimes you have to suspend when you go to the cinema. If you go to the cinema and you watch the Avatar film, they're supposed to be bringing another one out. I think they're supposed to be doing that for years now. But anyway, you go and watch Avatar. If you have to suspend some critical thinking to watch it. Otherwise, you'd be sitting there all the time thinking, why is everybody blue? What have they got copper oxide flowing through the body for, and all that sort of thing. So you have to suspend some of that. So now you have to do that with drama on TV too. You suspend a little bit of your critical, analytical thinking so that you can, enjoy what you're watching. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Let me just pick up the bits. It says under conscious and unconscious. It talks about alignment and integration. It mentions those things there. What you want to do in life is you want to have rapport between your conscious and your unconscious mind. You want them to be working together for you. Generally speaking, we set goals for ourselves consciously, but it's our unconscious mind that determines what our behavior is. So if you don't have your unconscious in alignment with your conscious mind, instead of going over here, you might go over here. Now, Arthur Schopenhauer was a German philosopher from the early part of the 19th century, part of the golden age of German philosophy in the 19th century. Now, he described the conscious and unconscious mind like this, slightly politically incorrect, but I will use it. What he said is your conscious mind is like a sighted person who can't walk, being carried on the shoulders of the unconscious mind, which is a sturdy, because it's carrying you, but a blind person, right? So it's like your conscious mind is aiming to give you the direction in life. But if the unconscious mind isn't, there isn't communication, rapport between those two, then, I said, you'd be going off, bumping into stuff and complaining about how unfair everything is. So what you want to do is you want to bring your conscious and your unconscious into alignment with each other and build rapport between the two. And now some of that's about what sort of language do you use consciously to talk to yourself? Are you using negative internal dialogue for yourself all the time? Because your unconscious is always listening to it. And Does the conscious mind pay attention to things which come up from the unconscious mind? Does it pay attention to that, or does it sort of push them away and doesn't want to deal with them? So I'm going to talk more about that later on as well. Now, another little concept, if I just press the button on here. We'll press it back and see if we can get it back. Oh no, can't do that. We'll get rid of that. Anyway, so let me just see if I can get it back. Let me just do that. If I could use the technology. There we go, managed to get it back. Right, so this is your normal waking state where you've got your conscious, your unconscious, and your critical faculty. Now, if I press the button again, I won't go back this time, but if I press the button again, now that's a trance state. Now, one of the things which we teach in NLP is hypnosis, because part of what NLP studied was a hypnotherapist. So another thing which I do is I do hypnosis, and I can train people to do hypnosis and all that sort of stuff. I train trainers in it and all that. So basically, this is what the trance state is. Now, the trance state isn't the removal of your consciousness. It's the removal of your willingness to analyze suggestion. So it's the removal of the critical faculty. Now, trance is a natural, normal sort of state of, human state. You be familiar with the idea of driving trance. So you're driving along, and after 20 minutes, you think, how on earth did I get here? No, you don't even know where I am. Where am I? Or you're watching television and you just like, and you think, what am I watching this for? It's that sort of thing. So you can be in a trance in a meeting, or waiting for a bus, or, trance is a natural, normal part of the human condition. Now, one of the things about trance is being in a slight trance is better for learning. Being in a slight trance makes it easier to listen to what the unconscious mind is, messages it's maybe got for you and that sort of thing. So trance is a useful thing to access. It's also meditation is a form of trance too. Now meditation is not part of NLP, but meditation is similar, to be honest, to some of the things we do. Meditation has been scientifically proven to help improve people's emotional resilience, their ability to focus in the present, and that sort of thing. And this is really because I think it's helping with this focus, and it helps with alignment between the conscious and the unconscious. So that I've gone here, that's the trance state. Now, there's just a little bit more detail about what your conscious and your unconscious minds do for you. So actually, let's again just do them one at a time. So I mentioned this already. Your conscious mind does your awareness of immediate experience. So when you're asleep, when you're totally unconscious, you've got no awareness of your immediate experience. So your conscious mind is there so that you're aware of what's happening to you. You've got a sense of it. You're observing it. You're interpreting what you get a sense of, what that is and that sort of thing. So your conscious mind does that. Your conscious mind is where willpower comes from too. You think, right, I'm just going to do it. I'll make myself do this. I get a sense of this every time I go to the gym. I drive to the gym, and it's like I sit in the car for like sort of sometimes I sit there for like 2 seconds and think, really couldn't be bothered. But I've driven all the way there, So it's your willpower that then gets you out of the car and goes in. I've never driven there, not gone in, I just would say, but it's that sense you get a bit of willpower, right? Let's do it. And then maybe if you're doing some exercises at the gym, it seems a bit tough, but you just push through with a bit of willpower. You can do it. That's your conscious mind sort of pushing you through. Your conscious mind is also short-term memory. Now, to get things into long-term memory, it's useful. Sleep is a good thing to get things into long-term memory, making connections between them as well. So those two things are useful. Conscious mind is doing a bit of short-term. What's not connected tends to be forgotten. Conscious mind, as I said already, is also kind of where you're setting goals from. So you'll set goals for yourself out of your conscious mind. You'll think, oh, I want to do this, or I want to achieve this, or I want to get to here or something. So that's generally done consciously. Now, your unconscious mind gets involved in learning. Now, when something's learned, it's in the unconscious, but the conscious mind gets involved. Now, the easiest way to bring this back into your awareness, I guess most of you drive. When you learn to drive, you go through this process of learning consciously. And the thing about driving is it's quite tricky to do consciously because you've got a lot of stuff to do. You've got to watch the road, look in the mirror. Well, the mirror's up there, but it's showing you about You got to coordinate the movement of your hand and your foot to change gear. You got to be aware of what's around you and all this sort of stuff. That's quite a lot. For your conscious mind is much more limited than your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind can do all of those things at once it's learned how to do them. But the conscious mind is there to kind of help in that sort of learning process. But that's why sometimes learning new stuff can seem difficult, because you've got so many things to do at once. Oops, going backwards. Your conscious mind does critical thinking, so it does analytical sort of. This is, some of your critical faculties. Does some of that analytical, which is fine. You need that. You need that sort of thing. Otherwise, you go around believing anything. So you need that too. Now, basically, your unconscious mind is doing everything else for you. So it runs and preserves your body for you. So you don't need to consciously think about digesting your breakfast or something like that. That would take up a lot of time if you're doing that, wouldn't it? Now, preserves the body. I'm not saying it always gets it right. Obviously, we do get ill and things like that. But your unconscious mind manages the systems of looking after the body, basically. So your unconscious mind then stores and organizes long-term memory. Now, there's a couple of different mechanisms for that. One of them is something we call the timeline. Now, I'll talk a little bit about timeline right at the very end. It's sort of like the second phase of the development of NLP. But it's one thing that NLP's uncovered is this idea that people have what we've then labeled as a timeline. Now, a timeline is a way to access memories about the past and ideas about what you're going to do in the future. Now, it's easy enough to get hold of. Often you have the past behind you and the future in front of you, or the past over here, future over here, or something like that. Now, it's just a metaphor that your unconscious mind is using to organize memories. Now, the reason it needs to do this is because everything happens now. All of your life happens now. There is no past or future in that sense. Everything is happening in the now. All your life experience happens in the now. So how do you know now that the breakfast you had this morning isn't the one that you had 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? And it's that sort of thing. Now, your unconscious mind just uses space, so it uses this spatial metaphor to understand time. Now, we don't have to get into all of this, but good old Albert Einstein did say that time and space are not two separate things. They are one thing, he said, which he rather unhelpfully then called space-time. It's like, I don't quite understand. All you're doing is stuck the two words together, mate. But it's the idea that time and space are sort of, intrinsically linked together. But your unconscious mind uses this sense of having a metaphorical representation of where the past and the future is to organize the memories. And it also uses Gestalt, which I referred to earlier, like this string of beads sort of thing, string of pearls. Yeah, and you have Gestalts for everything, for emotions or for chairs or cars, whatever it has to be. Relationships, yeah. Your unconscious mind also creates habits and maintains instincts. So we'll do instincts first. Instincts are things like your fight and flight response. So that's in what neuroscientists call the reptilian part of your brain. It's quite a deep sort of brain structure. Other bits of the brain is kind of built on top. Is that sort of thing. But anyway, so instincts like the instinct to reproduce and fight and flight and that sort of thing. These are instinctive things that we do. And that's, job of where think about unconscious mind is unconscious processing. So your brain's doing things, different parts of the brain is talking to each other, it's running processes, that sort of thing. That's kind of the summation of what we mean by unconscious mind. It's all these sort of processes that are going on. Now, habits, a habit is something you do habitually. You can't use the thing to define itself by using the word, Ewan. But basically, a habit is something you do and you just do it kind of without thinking about it. Oh, I just do that, all the time. Now, one thing about a habit is only a habit until you know that you're doing it. Once you know that you're doing it, it's actually a choice. Now, it's much easier for me to say that than it necessarily is for somebody to change it. Although there are things in NLP we can do to help people change things. Now, your unconscious mind also represses memories with unresolved negativity. So when something difficult happens for us in the past, the unconscious mind tends to repress that sense, that memory and the emotional sense of it. And it does that to protect you and so that you can get on with your life and that sort of thing. But as you see then, one of the jobs is to represent repressed memories. So at some future point, when it thinks you're ready to deal with it, your unconscious mind brings it back into your awareness. Now, often when the unconscious mind brings it back, we're like, I thought I'd dealt with that. Just about whenever you hear somebody say, I dealt with that, they've not let it go. What they've done is just shoved it down, and then it will come back up. Now, you can let it go. You can learn from it, and you can let it go. This is one of the things that we need to learn, that this is what a process our unconscious mind does. It naturally brings things into our awareness. Now, what we need to do consciously when it does that is have a look at it and think about, what can I learn from this? Can I let it go? And that sort of thing. That's really what the unconscious mind is asking us to do. So it represses stuff. When it thinks you're ready to deal with it, it brings them up. Now, we don't usually think we're ready to deal with it, but if the unconscious mind is bringing it up, we really are. That's the way of thinking about that. But anyway. Now, the unconscious mind works on the idea of symbolism. The conscious mind tends to be a little bit more literal, analytical, more literal. The unconscious mind is more symbolic and representational. Now, even letters and numbers, they're symbols at the end. You've learned them as letters and numbers, but they are just symbols at the end of the day. So that's often the unconscious mind communicates to the conscious mind in a symbolic manner. But we don't need to get too deep into that right now. But that's what happens with that. Now, your unconscious mind is also the seat of imagination. So as soon as you start thinking about the past or the future, you're using your imagination, because it's not happening right now. It's just, your imagination. Now, I know you don't tend to think of it like that. You think about memories. Oh, no, that really did happen. That's not my imagination. But is it fundamentally different in quality to the future? How do you know? It's this sense of timeline that tells you, but it's fundamentally the same sort of thing. You're doing it in here still. Now, your imagination can be a creative, iterative thing that can work with the conscious mind. So sometimes you want to do something creatively, you might get a sense from your unconscious, and then you might do something with that consciously, and then again you might get another sense. Another good thing to do is sleep is good for the imagination too. So often if you've got a problem to work on, or you want an idea for something, think about it before you go to sleep. When you wake in the morning, it's like often you've got a sense, I could maybe I've not tried that, I could do that. That's something which is quite useful for it. Now, the unconscious mind does more things. This is just some of the things it does, which I want to share with you. Now, the last one I put on here is this idea about your unconscious mind does not process negative things directly. Now, if I said to you, don't think of a blue tree, the chances are you're actually thinking of a blue tree. And that's because it's difficult for the mind to not think about what it's supposed to not think about without first of all thinking about what it's supposed to not think about, so it can think of something else. This is the idea. It doesn't process the negative directly. So when you're giving other people instructions, you want to tell them what to do, not what not to do. If you only ever tell people what not to do, they don't know what to do. They only know what not to do, not what to do. Now, we're all susceptible to this, children in particular, but we're all susceptible to it. You say to a child, don't touch that. They'll be like, I used to say to my kids all the time, don't spill the drink. Don't spill the drink. And obviously they spilled the drink then. So I needed to then change my language about how I was communicating with them. So that's, all right, let me tell you this as well. So you may not be into football, so maybe I'm wasting my time telling you this, but anyway, there's Harry Redknapp was football manager. He was at Portsmouth and he went to Spurs, and he took some of the players from Portsmouth to Spurs. This was quite a few years ago, right? And then Tottenham played Portsmouth, sorry. And he told Jermaine Defoe, who was one of the players, he said, don't get involved in any arguments with the other players and get involved in any, difficult stuff with them, that sort of thing. So he gave them this sort of pep talk at the start of the game. And then as the game started, Jermaine Defoe got sent off after 11 minutes because he did get involved in something. But that was the idea that the manager put into his head. He'd actually put that idea into his head by the language he was using. So when you understand that, you can actually change the way you speak to people so that you can avoid doing those sorts of things. It's often easier to tell somebody what not to do because you can maybe imagine them doing it and see them doing it. So, but you've got to change how you think about it. I worked with a rugby coach once, and he used to show his players before they went out for a game. He used to show his players video of all the mistakes they'd made in the previous game. because he wanted them not to make those mistakes. And what he found, it wasn't working very well. I said, well, why don't you work on all the difficult stuff, the things you want them to improve through the week? And before they go out to a game, show them video of all the things they've done well before. So he changed that, and that made a quite a big difference for him. Okay, so that's just a little bit about your conscious and unconscious. Now, what I'm going to do here, we're going to use this later on. I'm going to do a little exercise with you now, and I do a little exercise with you later on where we're going to use this. Now, this is the idea about light trance. It's called peripheral vision, which you'll see. Actually, let me put it up. No, let me just. So I'm going to ask you to access your peripheral vision, right? So what it says in the middle here, it says on the picture, on the slide, it says foveal. Now, foveal is the central part of your vision. Now, the central part of your vision is good for color. Most of the color receptors in the central part of your vision. And in the peripheral part of your vision, it tends to be more black and white that you see. And you see movement better. Now, I know your unconscious mind creates something which looks color all the way around, but actually the receptors for color are mainly in the center, and then the periphery is mainly black and white, but it does movement better in the periphery. Right? Now, the reason it's called the learning state, if you access your peripheral vision, it brings up a little bit of light trance, not massive, just a little bit of light trance. Now, what that means is it quietens down the conscious mind, and it makes it easier for you to pay attention to what comes up from the unconscious. Just quietens the conscious mind down just a little bit. And that makes information easier to go in. It loosens the critical faculty a little bit. That's why it's called the learning state. So I'm going to ask you just to access that. So you've had a little practice, and then we'll use it because later on I'm going to get you to think about something you want to achieve in the future. And I'm going to get you to maybe change some of the qualities of that. And we'll use the peripheral vision state to help with that as well. But we'll have a little practice now. So I'm going to tell you now what I want you to do, and then I'll tell you to do it, right? So the thing that I want you to do is I want you to find a spot above eye level. I'm kind of doing it now. So find a spot above us. So I'm looking over the computer. Find a spot above eye level. And while you do so, I want you to allow your awareness to spread to periphery. So when I do that, I can see a sort of, I'm sitting in a dining room here, so I can see a lounge down there. I can see windows here and outside here, and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So I'm going to ask you to do it now. So find a spot above eye level. And as you focus in on that spot, you focus in on the spot, just allow your awareness to spread into the periphery. So you can see all the things out to your right-hand side, and you can see all the things out to your left-hand side. And notice it's almost like you can imagine you've got a green tennis ball right behind the back of your head. Maybe you can pull your awareness all the way around while you still focus on that spot. Now, while you do so, just notice your level of relaxation begin to change while you do that. Now that's a state. You can hold that state and still bring your eyes back down. So it's not, as I said, it's not loads of trance or anything, just a little bit tends to quieten the conscious mind down, makes it easier for you to pay attention to the unconscious. So you can kind of come back into it. I'm going to talk about a couple of other things now. Let me just check the time. All right, so we've got just about to start something new. It's maybe about 10 minutes early, but I think what we'll do is because I'm about to do something else, I'm about to talk about how we experience the world, which will be quite a long segment. So what we'll do is we'll have our break now, even though it's not quite 11 yet. And I'll aim to start, let me see, I'll start maybe just a few minutes before 11, but about 3 minutes to 3 minutes to 11, something like that. So that's about 9 minutes that you got as a break. So I'll leave all of this on, obviously, and I'll just nip to the loo myself. So start again in a few minutes. Okay, so I'll start again in a minute, folks. I'm just going to top my water up, I think, and then we'll start again. So my glass is once more full instead of being half full. Jolly good. Okay, so if you're all set, I'll crack on. So what I'm going to talk about next is, as it says on the slide here, how we experience the world. So the idea, this is what's called the NLP model of communication. So the idea here is it breaks down schematically, it's a representation, how we experience the world, and then a sense of how we create behavior as a result of that. Now, there's quite a lot of information on this slide, so let me give you a big picture, and then we'll go down into a little bit of detail with it. So the big picture here is that you take in information on the right-hand side, where it says visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. Those are just posh words for your senses. So it's seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, and tasting. So you take information in through your 5 senses. Now, I won't dwell too much on this right now, but you get a lot of information coming in. Various estimates, I've seen various estimates for this, but let's go with the number of about 2 million bits per second. Now, what the definition of a bit is a bit unclear in some of the things I've read, but anyway, so what you need to take from this is you get lots of information coming in, about 2 million, say, big number. Now, if you look just on the left-hand side at the top, it says 134 bits, 7 plus or minus chunks. Now, you can only deal with a much smaller amount of information than the information you're getting presented with. And in consciousness, for sure, you chunk that into 7 plus or minus 2 bits. Right? That's all that bit on the left-hand side is saying. So you take in lots of information. Now, you then have filters inside your brain, break them down into mind things that we can grab hold of. But your unconscious mind, your unconscious processing, then deletes, distorts, and generalizes all that information that's coming in. And it's your filters that do that unconsciously for you. Now, on top of that, humans have a range. There's loads of information that we're subject to, but we only sort of see a small fraction of the visible wave, the electromagnetic wave spectrum. We don't see all of it. Some animals can see an ultraviolet or infrared, whereas we don't. We've got this particular band. And our hearing is in a particular band. Dogs are well known to hear higher things, elephants, lower things, and that sort of thing. Obviously, there's crossover, but so, I won't get into all the detail of that, but basically human neurology only sees a limited amount of the information that's out there in the first place. On top of that, your individual filters delete, distort, and generalize the information you're taking in from your 5 senses. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. What then happens is you create a representation of what you've experienced on the inside. Now, that's what we call in NLP internal representation. So you then create an internal representation. Now, if I said to you, think about your favorite food and think about how much you like your favorite food. As you think about how much you like your favorite food, do you have a picture? Now, if you then get a sense of something in your mind, you probably find that that's got visual qualities. You might hear something, you may not, but you may hear something, you may feel something, you may get smell, taste as well. And you may even be saying something to yourself. Now, I talked about this earlier, this sort of internal dialogue, what we call in NLP auditory digital. That's sort of like a sixth sense, not a sixth sense that you can perceive things, but it's another sort of way of representing the world, that you sort of talk to yourself about the world, analyze things and that sort of thing. Now, you do that as well by the time it's in here. So that's what an internal representation is. You experience something, your filters delete, distort, and generalize it. You create an internal experience in here of it. Now, often that's unconscious, where you're doing it. But again, you can bring it up into consciousness. Now, underneath that, it says state and physiology. It's got some little triangles. Now, what that indicates is the internal representation, your state and your physiology are connected together. So state is how you feel. Do you feel happy, excited, motivated, anxious? That's what your state is. Physiology is how are you sitting, standing? Have you got a presentation to do? Do you get sweaty palms, or does your breathing rate change, or something like that? That's what physiology is. Now, those three things are connected together: internal representation, state, and physiology. So if you change what you focus on, it can change your state. It can change your physiology. Change your physiology can change your state, change your internal representation. That's why people often say, if you feel anxious or something, you're nervous about something, control your breathing, because although, yes, you breathe unconsciously, you can get conscious control over it. And you can do deep breathing and you can relax more because you change your physiology. By changing your physiology, you can change your state and then what you're able to focus on. Sometimes what you focus on changes your state and your physiology. This is fundamentally what anxiety is about. Now, very common problem. Now, you can have diagnosable anxiety disorder. You can have a little bit of worry. You can have everything in between. The common theme with this is you are in here focusing on what you do not want to happening in the future. Now, basically, your sense then of feeling anxious is your unconscious mind telling you you're focused on what you don't want. That's sort of the message that you're getting. Now, again, it's really easy for me to say, well, focus on what you do want. Fundamentally, that's actually what people need to do, but there are often things which stop us doing that. You might have circumstances in your life. You might have beliefs about yourself, or you might have negative emotions from the past. There could be lots of things which prevent you from imagining the future working out the way that you do want. But fundamentally, that's where you need to get to with anxiety. You need to be able to imagine the future working out the way that you want. Come back to some of that in a moment. So you can see it's those three things together that produces what your behavior is. So that's kind of the big picture sense. 5 senses: taking information, your filters, and your own neurology. Delete, distort, and generalize it. You create unconsciously often internal representation in here. That's connected with your state, how you feel, and your physiology, how your body is. And it's the three things together: internal representation, state, and physiology produces your behavior. Now, I'm going to go through the filters in a sec. NLP works with all of these things. So it works with internal representation. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. It works with your state. It can work with your physiology as well. And it can work with change, find out what your filters are. It can do all of those things. The other thing it says on this slide, which I haven't mentioned yet, is what you focus on determines your results. So are you focused on what you want? One thing which is very useful to do in performance, sports, any sort of performance, presenting, that sort of thing, is you want to imagine yourself, picture yourself doing the things successfully that you want to before you do it. Because that sort of builds up a sense in your mind of you already doing it. The mind knows precious little difference between imagining doing something and doing it for real. Many of you may have heard this quoted before, but there was a study done many years ago with basketball. It got some people to practice shooting baskets, practice doing it. It got some other people to imagine shooting baskets, and it got a control group who played pool, never went near basketballs or anything like that. And what they found was the groups that had practiced shooting baskets and imagining shooting baskets without doing it physically, when they tested them physically, they were just as good as each other. And the people who played pool, they were pretty hopeless. They're all right at playing pool, but not so good at basketball. So this is the idea of, what you focus on in your mind determines what your results are. So what are you focused on in your mind? Now, let's look at the filters in the middle. Now, let's talk about delete, distort, and generalize first of all. So delete means you leave some of the information out. So you get all this information come in. Your filters say, we're not going to pay attention to all that information. We've got too much information. So your filters go, let's leave some of this out. Now, you can have a philosophical discussion about whether you can access it again or not, but let's not get into all of that. Distort means you take a different meaning. Now, here's a little concept for you. Might not be immediately obvious, and you might need to go away and think about this a bit, but no experience you have in life comes with a built-in meaning. It doesn't come with a little setting at the bottom. This means this. We get to decide what things mean in our lives. Now, the way you decide, we all of us decide what things mean, is we compare it to other things we've previously experienced or imagined things we could experience. And that's what tells us what an experience means. But fundamentally, no experience comes with a built-in meaning. Now, this is the idea about distort then. So because the experience doesn't come with a built-in meaning, we tend to look at things differently. Our filters can change the meaning of something when it comes in. Now, some of the things that we do in NLP is we ask people to, the term we use is reframe, or change the way you're looking at something. Don't look at it like this, look at it like this instead. You get this sense of reframing gets used quite a lot in marketing. You know, if you see coffee adverts, obviously they show you the coffee and that sort of thing, but what they're trying to sell is a relationship. They show a happy couple sharing a moment together or something, and that's the sense that they're wanting to sell. When people sell holidays, again, they do show you the sun, the sand, and the sea, but what they show you is a family and people together enjoying that. So they're selling you this idea of relationship. That's basically what reframing is about. So you can change a meaning of something by looking at it differently. Now, that's what we all do naturally anyway. Our unconscious mind, our filters distorts things that come in. Now, I'm not saying whether it's right, wrong, or whatever. It's just is what it is. It's that. So, now, generalize means that it's very good for learning. Generalize. So you have an experience about something, and then you have a similar experience. It's like, well, I've already had that experience. Then I kind of know what it's about. It's like, take something really simple like a chair. So I'm sitting on a chair now. When I came and sat on this chair, I didn't need to relearn what a chair was. I've sat on loads of chairs over the years. I've got a whole chair gestalt, which includes things like tables. You can sit on a table and treat it like a chair. It's that sort of thing. So it's quite good for learning, but it can be a problem with maybe some emotional things, or say, take a relationship. If somebody behaves like that and behaved in a certain way in a relationship in the past, you might assume everybody in relationships behaves like that. Might not be so great. Nevertheless, our unconscious mind is doing these three things all the time: leaving stuff out, taking meaning from something because it has to take a meaning, but could there be a different meaning maybe? And it also generalizes. So this is like all these other things. That's what generalizing is. That's just what we tend to do because we're getting so much information. All of them can be okay. All of them can potentially be problems. Now I'm going to run through the filters for you here now. Give you a little bit of information on each one. Now, attitudes they're a bit on the surface. They don't work too much with attitudes in NLP, but they're still there. It's like, what's your attitude towards food, or what's your attitude towards work, what's your attitude towards alcohol or something. So it's like collections of values and beliefs about a subject, a bit on the surface. If you have teenagers, you know what attitude is just by looking at them. You can see what their attitude is. It's usually quite easy to tell. Now, values and beliefs are grouped together. They're kind of related. One of the ways of thinking about values, it's like a chunked up, generalized version of a bunch of beliefs. But anyway, I'll talk about values first of all. If we do separate them out, values are things which are important to you. So it's things that you will utilize energy in your life, motivate you to move towards or move away from or something. They're usually individual words. Could be things like trust, respect, recognition, success, commitment, things like that. In organizations, they often have values. Now, an organization will always have values. They won't always be the ones that they've written on a piece of paper. It's how do people behave in the organization really determines what the values are, despite what's written on a piece of paper. And sometimes people at the top don't do what they want everybody else to do. But the idea is they're trying to get this sense of sort of the DNA of the business, trying to get people to behave in a certain way. That's the idea with values. It's not always done brilliantly, but that's what it is. Sometimes it is though. Now, you have values. If you've ever worked for a corporation and you feel like maybe you don't quite fit in, or you feel like you do fit in. If you do fit in, your values are matched with the values which are expressed in the business. If you feel like you don't fit in, it's probably because the values that you've got are, not the ones that the business has. That's often what that's about. Similar thing with relationships. So usually in relationships, we aim to be in relationships with people where there's a degree of commonality in values. Now, the values don't need to be absolutely the same, but there's a degree of commonality in the values. So you kind of value the same things. You're kind of interested in the same things. People often talk about your other half. Now, you look for difference in other areas. Usually values, you look for a degree of similarity. I say it doesn't need to be 100% the same, but fair degree of similarity. Now, values are also arranged in hierarchies. You have the most important value, next most important, next most important, next most, and you get them in different areas of your life, like your career, your family, relationships, if that's different, personal growth and development, health and fitness, your spirituality, that sort of stuff. Now, beliefs are things that you can and you can't do. They tend to empower or disempower you. So I believe I can do this, you go and do it. Or I believe I can't do this, but I'll try. I was right, I can't do it. So your beliefs so if you think about it this way, the energy to motivate you comes from your values. So that's sort of like the battery providing the energy. Your beliefs are like a switch. If you believe you can do something, the switch is on and the energy flows through. If you don't believe you can do it, the switch is closed and the energy coming from your values doesn't flow through. And beliefs, you can have limiting beliefs which stop you doing things you do want to do. You can change them fundamentally. It's you could have beliefs like, sometimes beliefs which people have is that they're not good enough or something like that, or they don't deserve this, that, and the other, or I can't do this, or this is, I'll never do this, or something like that. Well, you can change these things. It's possible to change them. And obviously you can have empowering beliefs, that you believe that if you spend enough time on anything, if you're interested enough, you can learn anything or something. It's that sort of thing. So useful to have empowering beliefs because you're spiraling up. But if you have a disempowering beliefs, you have the belief, you have a go at doing something, you get negative results, it reinforces the belief, which then produces your results. So you can have a downward spiral, or you can, if you've got positive beliefs, you can have an upward spiral. And again, it's releasing this energy from your values, if you like. Think about it that way. Now, meta programs, it's a bit of jargon. Another way of talking about meta programs is preferences. So we have preferences. Now, when it comes to any preference, you can always do the other. So if you've got a preference for this, you can do this, but I prefer this. Now, there are quite a lot of these. Now, not all the time, but this is some of the time when we sometimes look for difference with our partners. If this is when it's you talk about your other half, because your partner has these preferences, I've got these preferences which are different, but we work together well. Obviously, often people can work well in teams better if they've got people who've got different preferences. Now, ones which get used quite a lot in business are Myers-Briggs preferences. I'm sure many of you will have come across this at work, but I'll run through briefly what they are so you get an understanding of it. It's 4 sets of preferences. Now, each preference has 2 bits to it. Now, you can be strongly one, strongly the other, or in between. Now, whatever you are, you can always do the other, but you might prefer this one. So the first set of these 4 sets of 2 preferences are introvert and extrovert. So introverts recharge their batteries by being by themselves, and extroverts recharge their batteries by being with other people. So and I'm sure you can get a sense of how you are on that front. If you went to a party, would you go around and talk to loads of different people, or would you just stand in a corner because you're like, I wish I hadn't come to this party at all, and just stand at home, nobody speaks to me? It's that sort of thing. So that's sort of a little bit of introvert and extrovert. What you also get is you get sensor and intuitor. Now, sensors like detailed, practical applications of things, and so they like detail. Intuitors like big picture, abstract ideas, and they talk in more higher chunk words which can have lots of meaning to them. So you get quite a lot of communication problems with sensor and intuitor, because in business context and personal life, I guess, as well, because you'll get a sensor will have no idea what an intuitor is talking about, and they just want to know what they need to do, whereas an intuitor can get frustrated that the sensor's not interested in this wonderful concept that you're dreaming up. I'm more of an intuitor. I get accused all the time by Joanne of not reading emails properly, which is guilty as charged, I think, on that one. So you get introvert, extrovert, you get sensor, intuitor. What you also get is thinker, feeler. Now, thinker, feeler is about how you make decisions. Do you make decisions based on analytical logic, or do you go with the gut sense sort of thing? Now, neither's right or wrong. They're just different ways of doing it. That's what that is. And the last one is judger, perceiver. Now, what judger, perceiver is about is just, how do you like your life to be? Do you like it structured, ordered, planned? That's what judges like closure. They like to see what the structure of something is, or the plan, and that sort of thing. It's not that they're judging other people. It's just they like a structured, ordered sort of life. And perceivers just go with the flow. My daughter's boyfriend, he's more of a judger, and when we could go to a restaurant, I've not really been to a restaurant since they've opened up, but before COVID, if we were going to a restaurant, if we're going out at the weekend or something, he's wanting to know earlier in the week which restaurant we're going to, and shall we book a table and things like that. And I'm more, well, I don't know if I'm going to be hungry then. I'd rather make the decision when I'm about to go to the restaurant, rather than, I'll see what I fancy then. Do I need to be tied down now? It's some of that sort of difference between judger, perceiver. Now, I said you can have a strong preference for one or a strong preference for the other, or you can be a bit in between, and you can always do both. Some of the things with the Myers-Briggs is you can often flex yourself. So I'm a little bit more introverted, but I can do extrovert. I'm more big picture, but I can do detail. Now, if I'm having to be extrovert and doing detail at the same time, well, that's going to be a little bit harder, because I'm having to flex out of two things that. And often you look for teams. You like people to do everything. As it happens, I've worked with Joanne now for a good number of years, coming up for 20 years now, and she is the opposite on Myers-Briggs from me. So if I'm more introverted, she's more extroverted. If I like big picture, she likes detail. It's that sort of thing. So we work quite well together, because we cover all the bases. Now, you have other preferences too. There are lots of other preferences that you've got. Let me just explain one of these to you, which might be useful. Again, in communication, in relationships, and that sort of thing. It's the idea of, do you listen to the inference in what somebody says, or do you listen literally to what somebody says? So if somebody you knew quite well said, I'm thirsty, if you're listening to the inference, you would say, oh, would you like me to get you a drink? Shall I get you a drink? But if you're listening to what they literally said, if somebody said, I'm thirsty, you would think, right, so what's that got to do with me? Right. So if somebody you knew quite well said, I'm thirsty, what would you do? Now, again, you can get mismatches here in communication with people. So that's a useful one to be aware of. Now, the next filters, and there are other preferences which I've not been through as well. Decisions and memories. I'll kind of talk about those together. What decisions are is, you'll often have an experience in life, and from the experience you make a decision. Now, if it's a limiting decision, so one that prevents you doing things you'd actually quite like to do, what often happens is you have a negative emotion. I feel a negative emotion. Because you're in a negative emotional state, you make a decision. And then that's then stored in your unconscious mind, and you end up believing it, and you act it out as if it was true. Your unconscious mind faithfully carries on that belief for you. Now, it's probably not objectively true. And you got to remember, you're in a negative state when you made it in the first place. So that's something you can go back to that memory. You can change it. That's something you can do with some of the timeline work, which I'll talk about later on. So that's a little bit about decisions. They can lead to beliefs. Now, memories. One thing with memories is you have to remember that everybody is filtering their current experience of their interaction with you through their past memories. Now, I find memories fairly reliable. I find with things like hypnosis, timeline therapy, memory's not bad, but I'm not saying it's totally infallible though either. And the other thing with life in general is we all have unique perspectives. So somebody else's perspective isn't your perspective. So you can have I had a lady on training last year, I think it was, and she said that her sister says that in our family growing up, she says all our food had weevils in it, had like little bugs in it or something like that. Now that came from one event where their mum gave them some biscuits which were kind of considerably out of date, and they did have little bugs in them, right? So from that, her sister has generalized it that all of the food that we got, all of it, all the time had little bugs in it, which is totally not true. So you get different, true for her perspective maybe though. So you get different perspective. Everybody's got their own unique perspective. Another example of this is going to meetings. So you can go to a meeting and you can come away from a meeting with a totally different idea about what somebody else has taken from the meeting. That's because everybody's got their own perspective. Now, everybody then is filtering their current experience through their past memories. Now, one thing you can get with this is sometimes you can get people having what seems like a bit of an overreact to you, might seem to you like an overreaction to something. The reason for that is they are filtering their interaction with you through past memories, and maybe in the context that you're having this discussion in, they've had some negative experiences in the past. For example, in a work situation, you may not be being particularly authoritarian, but the other person has past problems with authority figures. They may see you like that because they're filtering their current experience with you through all of that. So they react to you in a manner that you're being authoritarian when you didn't think you were really. That's one of the things you got with memories. Now, again, it's possible with memories just to go and look at them from a different perspective, pick something else up, change it a little bit, change, what you've learned, what you've taken from it, not change the content of it as such. So it's a little bit about memories. Remember, filtering all your experience through it. Now, language, I did talk about language earlier on, so I won't say too much more here, but even in English, there's structure in language about big picture and detail, which is useful to have more of an understanding of. It's useful to have more of an understanding of when people use certain words, what does that tell you about what their thinking is? It's useful to understand when you're listening to somebody else that, am I mind reading? Did the person actually say what I'm thinking, or did they say something else? So these are all things that we cover in NLP on language. We talk about reframing language things linguistically for people, their experience as well. And also remember this idea about different words mean different things for people as well. Just hearing the dog outside. I don't know if he's decided he wants to come in or not. And then the last filter we got on here is this idea of time, space, matter, and energy. Now, it's the idea of causality. When you get into matter and energy, you're into the idea of causality as well. So we filter all of our life experience through the sense of time and space and this sense of causality. This causes this causes this, and that sort of thing. So we're doing that all the time. Now, it's not saying there's a problem with it or anything wrong with it or anything like that. It's just that's what we do. So just to summarize this then for you is just appreciate that you are doing this, everybody else is doing this. We all unconsciously taking information through our five senses, our filters, our own unique filters, unconsciously for us, delete, distort, and generalize the information. We then often, sorry, there's somebody at the door, the dog's getting quite excited about it. We then again unconsciously create an internal representation which will be coded in the five senses. I'm going to talk more about this in a second. Be coded in the five senses, and will include a bit of self-talk as well then. So that's your internal representation. Your internal representation is what you're focused on. That's then connected with your state and with your physiology. So state is how you feel: happy, excited, motivated, anxious. Physiology is then how you're standing, sitting, have you got sweaty palms? What's your breathing rate like? That's your physiology. So So that we're all doing this all the time. And it's just kind of a sort of a schematic representation of that. And as I said before, NLP works with internal representation, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. So it works with state, it works with physiology, and it can find out what your filters are, and it can change what some of those filters are too. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of switch tack just a little bit and talk about, so I'm going to talk about a couple of other things, and I've got, so I'm going to talk about this. There isn't an exercise with this, but then, so I'm going to talk about eye movements in a minute. This is just to give you a bit of information. We'll be going into this in more detail in the training, but just to give you some information. And then I'm going to talk about what we call submodalities, which is then about the quality of internal representation. So we're just going into a little bit more detail from what we've just been talking about. So this is just a little bit different now. This is one of the things that we go through on the training, and it's about observing other people and noticing what you can see when you observe other people, and what does it mean and what does it not mean. Now, there are lots of things you can observe when you observe other people. Now, you're observing this unconsciously anyway. What NLP is doing is help bringing it into your consciousness and tuning up your unconscious ability to do it. So again, you consciously know what it means and maybe what it doesn't mean. So other things as well as eyes, which I'm about to talk about, you can also notice people's skin color. You know, if they've got more blood flow in the face. You can notice how the eyes, as well as the movement, you can notice how they're focused. You can notice what people's breathing is and that sort of thing. Now, these are all useful things to notice, because you can notice when somebody's changing. So somebody's like this and then they're like this. Now, what you're noticing is physiology. Because of what we just talked about, if somebody's physiology is changed and you can see it, that means their state and or their internal representation is changed as well. So let me just go through this. Now, you may have noticed, you may not, but you may have noticed when you talk to other people, they move their eyes around. They even replicate it on cartoons. If you watch cartoons, they've got the characters moving their eyes around. Now, I don't know what the lighting's like, whether you can, how clearly you can see me on this. I sit a little bit closer, don't be put out by that, just so you can see the, I don't know if that helps actually, maybe I'll sit further back. Anyway, I'm going to show you on the slide as well. So this is, what does it mean when people move their eyes in certain ways, right? Now, the movement on the slide is a little bit slow. The movement tends to be a bit faster than it's shown on the slide, but it's just helping you notice it, that's all. So if somebody moves their, going backwards, not forwards, let's try again. If somebody moves their eyes up to their left, your right as you look at somebody, then they are recalling pictures in their mind. That's what it tells you. It doesn't tell you what the picture is. All it tells you is they're recalling a picture in their mind. Now, what that's useful for is, as you're talking to somebody else, what you do, what I tend to do is I'm listening to somebody, I'm watching the physiology, I'm watching their eye moves, and I'm listening to the words. So as I listen to the words, are the words that they say matched up with their eye movements? It's kind of, and what that does for me is it gives me a sense of, maybe I'll ask a question about this, or if I'm asking for a process, like I was with the chat with these getting anxious before presenting. If I'm asking him about his process, I can see what he's doing. And if he doesn't give me the information, even though I can see it with his eyes, I can then ask him about it because I'm seeing it with his eyes. It's that. So it helps bring out process, and you get a sense of, is the message that I'm getting verbally, is that congruent with what I'm seeing with the eyes? Now, let me see if I'm moving the slides in the right direction. Yeah. So the next one, if somebody moves their eyes in line with the ears to their left, your right as you look at them, they're remembering a sound. Now, that's it could be any sound really, but it's most often a conversation with somebody else. So again, if I've got a client and they're talking about something and I see them do that, but they don't say they spoke to somebody else, I can say to them, have you spoken to somebody else about this? So having this understanding makes you appear to be more intuitive. Kind of does make you more intuitive, although it's not really intuition. It's just you're seeing what's happening. But if somebody's observing it, you'll appear to be more intuitive because you're picking up more from the other person than you might have actually. You're probably getting the information before, you just didn't know what to do with it. So it's now you can get a sense of, well, I can maybe do something with that. Now, the next one then is If somebody moves their eyes down to their left, your right as you look at them, what that means is they're talking to themselves in their head. Now, that's really useful for me when I'm coaching other people, because when I see them do that, I know they're thinking about something, or I know they're talking to themselves. So I can ask them either about what they say to themselves or what do they think about something. And otherwise, I wouldn't have got that information. But I know, because of the eye movements, to ask for that information, because I know that's what they're doing. Um, Now, the next one is visual construct. Now, visual construct is up. So the visual's all up. The auditory is in line with the ears, and the other two at the bottom. So visual construct is somebody moves their eyes up to their right, your left as you look at them. Now, they're imagining pictures in the future. Now, that could be, where do you see yourself in 5 years or something like that? Well, somebody might do that. Or if you're doing something creative, you might be doing that. Or if you're buying clothes, even, will this go with whatever? What will I look like in this? That's you can see somebody doing that. That's what visual construct is about. Now, just because you see somebody do visual construct doesn't mean they're lying. Taken with other things, it could be an indication, but doesn't actually mean somebody's lying if they do visual construct. Now, auditory construct is in line with the ears to their right, your left as you look at somebody. Now, what that's about is it's a made up sound. Now, most commonly, what I see with this is one of two things. It could be many things, but most commonly, it's one of two things. How will it sound if I say this? Is one thing I see. And the other thing is maybe an imagined future conversation. So, what you're going to say to your partner when you get home or something like that. So, imagined future conversation. And if you move your eyes down to your right, so their right, your left as you look at somebody, that is them accessing feelings. So we see somebody that they're accessing feelings. So if it's appropriate, you could ask about those feelings. You might be able to see what the feelings are anyway. Or you may notice somebody who has a little flick down there, you may know that they've got feelings about something, which maybe you hadn't quite appreciated before or something. So as I said, with all of this, there are other things which you can see from a sensory point of view. So we go through all those on the training, and what it does is it helps you to identify when that somebody's state's changed. That means that the physiology's changed. That means their state or their physiology's changed. And with the eye movements as well, it's another bit of observation. It's just making you a little bit more intuitive. So from a coaching perspective, or just a general interaction in relationships or management perspective, you get more information from somebody by observing them, and then you can maybe do something with that information. Now, I'm not saying all the time every single movement will always be useful for you, but that's the sort of thing that you can do with it. Now, one thing I'd recommend you do is when you watch television, if you're watching somebody on television, you often see politicians on television. Often when they're interviewed, they don't move their eyes much. And that's because they've prepared what they're going to say before they go out there. What you're doing with this, I didn't tell you before, but what you're doing with this is you're pulling information from unconsciousness into conscious awareness. If the information's already in conscious awareness, you don't need to move your eyes. So you often see politicians not moving their eyes that much when they're interviewed on TV. It's not because they know about this, it's because they've already prepared what they're going to say. So if the information's in consciousness, somebody doesn't need to move their eyes. It's when somebody has to go and get the information that they move their eyes. Now, if you watch other people being interviewed, if you get subject matter experts and that sort of thing, other people being interviewed, or some person on the street being interviewed, then they will more often move their eyes around as they're being asked questions to answer the question. So just so you can get a sense of noticing it, all I want you to do is notice this to begin with. That's all. So that was all I was going to share with you about that. And now I'm going to have a little chat about this. So this little section is called submodalities. Now, just again, bit of jargon. What modalities are is visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and in NLP we include a bit of this self-talk, this auditory digital as your modalities. Now, that's how humans tend to represent the world. We tend to represent the world through some combination of our vision, our hearing, our feeling sense, and our thinking analytical type sense. Now, um, we may use all of them evenly, or we may favor one over another. So some people are maybe more visual, some people are maybe more feeling. Again, if I use Joanna as an example, she's a little bit more feeling and visual. She's kind of quite strong on the two. Now, me, I'm a little bit more of the auditory digital, a little bit more analytical sort of thing. So we've got different ways of representing the world. Those are modalities. Now, what submodalities are then is when you get into the detail of the pictures or the sounds or the feelings that you've got inside. Now, what I've got on the next slide is just some examples of those. So I'll show you that first, then I'll talk a little bit about how and why submodalities are useful. So I'll just give you examples first of all. So these are some examples of visual, auditory, kinesthetic what we call submodalities. So it's more detail within the modality. So visual, if you've got a picture in your mind, now when I first started doing this, when I was studying before I went on training, and even when I turned up there, I was seeing people say, oh, people get pictures in their head and you can get these qualities. And I was sitting there thinking, well, don't be stupid, I get pictures in my head. And then I thought, yeah, I do actually. I do get pictures in my head. I wasn't really aware of it before, and that's getting this sense of bringing it up from your unconscious and holding it in your conscious mind. And when you do it, you kind of get said, yeah, actually, now you mention it, I think I do get pictures in my head. Now, one of the ways to get a sense of this is I could say things to you like I did before. You think about your favorite food. Do you get a picture? Or I could say, when do you think about where you went on holiday last? Do you get a picture? I could say, when you think about where you're going to go on holiday in the future, do you get a picture? I could say, when you think about your partner, do you get a picture? When you think about your pets or your kids, do you get a picture? Now, what you'll notice is you can bring pictures into your awareness. Now, I'm not saying you can hold on to it for ages and ages, but you can hold on to it for a few seconds. And as you hold on to it, you can actually find out what some of the qualities are. If somebody asked you, and if I said, is that picture black and white or color? Is it bright or dim? What's the spatial location? Is it sort of far away? Is it really close? Is it over here or over there? You can pick out spatial location, even things like whether it's framed or panoramic or whether it's focused or defocused and that sort of thing. Now, there are bits of jargon on here. It says associated and dissociated. Associated just means you're looking through your own eyes, a bit like you are now. Dissociated would be looking at yourself from an angle. So if I was dissociated, I would be looking myself from over there or something, see myself sat here. That's dissociated. But you can find out what these qualities are. Now, until you're kind of used to doing it, you maybe don't quite appreciate that. But, you know, with a bit of practice, you notice that you can do it. Similar thing with sounds. Now, it's not as common always to have sounds, but you can often have sounds and they may be coming from a particular location or direction. They may be loud, soft, fast, slow, whatever they happen to be. Kinesthetic is feelings. Now, when you get a feeling inside, you can notice where about that is. Does it have, may have a shape? Not always, but it may have a shape, maybe round or square or something. May have an intensity. Now, that's measured on a scale 0 to 10. If it's really intense or it's not quite so intense. May have a bit of heat, weight, pressure, and that sort of thing. Now, again, you can change some of these things. This is one of the things about submodality. You can change it. I had a lady on training years ago who had a moth phobia. So she's phobic of moths, right? Very sensible, I would say. But anyway, she's phobic of moths. Now, when I asked her about it, we can't see down here, but she had, I'll do it higher up. It was lower down, sort of in the stomach. But she had a feeling, and she said the feeling's going around like this. It was lower down, but she said she got a feeling it's going around like that. I said to her, oh, could you get the feeling to go back around the other way? And are you able to still do the phobia? And she was like, no, if I get it to go that way, I can't do the phobia there. Now, again, I was just sort of experimenting with it just to see if that would change it, and that changed the phobia for her. Now, not every phobia is that easy to get to let go of, but you know, it's things. This is some of the way that you're using the qualities of these are qualities of internal representation. That's one of the ways you're using the qualities of it, because you can change your experience, which is what's on this slide really. What submodalities are and why they're important is submodalities are how Oh, we're getting somebody else coming to the door by the sound of it. The dog's doing his guard duty. Anyway, so submodalities are how we encode and give meaning. He takes it very seriously. He's got a job to do, and he takes it very seriously, what he has to do. And I can assure you, his bark is much worse than his bite. He's a big softy, really. But I think he's dealt with the danger. I think it's safe to carry on now. So what I was saying, submodalities then are how we encode and give meaning to our internal representations. So you may think it would be the content of the internal representation that gives it meaning. If you see a picture of your favorite food, it may be because you see, if you like steak and chips, if that would be what it was, then you see the steak and chips. But it's actually the submodality qualities. If I can go backwards, if I go back to where it was, it's actually these qualities which give the meaning to the internal representation, not the content. So that's how we know the meaning of one internal representation from another, is because of these submodality qualities, these qualities of the internal representation. That helps us determine that this means I like it, this means I don't like it, because those qualities are different. Now, what you can do then is you can change the submodalities. Now, one of the exercises I do on training, just so that you get a sense of how change is possible and that sort of thing, is you can take a food that you like, you can find out what all the qualities of the internal representation are. You can take a food that you really dislike. I don't know, you get some strange things that people dislike, but anyway, so you get the internal representation qualities of something dislike, and you can take those qualities from it, but the thing you dislike, and you can change the thing that you do like, so that the thing that you previously liked, you now also dislike it. Now, you might think, what on earth do you want to do that for? But maybe if you've got a problem with something, I've had people who've had like a gluten intolerance or something, but they find it difficult not to eat bread despite that. So what you can do is you can make the bread seem like something they already do dislike, so they can stop eating bread or something. It's kind of that sort of thing. But that's the sort of thing that you can do. The other things you can do, which I'll chat you through in a sec with some modalities, so that you can change. He's having a bit of a cry now. So you can change how you actually focus on things in your life. And I'm going to get you to do a little exercise in a sec as well. So as it says at the bottom, you change the submodalities, it changes the internal representation, because that's connected to your state and your physiology, and the three together produce your behavior. Simply changing the submodalities changes your behavior. That's what that's saying. Now, just to give you a little sense of this, just to sort of try it out a little bit for yourself, I'm going to ask you to do this in a minute. Now, what I'll do is first of all, I'll talk through what I'm going to ask you to do, and then I'll ask you to do it. So you don't need to do it just yet. I'll talk you through what I'm going to ask you to do first of all. So first of all, I'm going to ask you to access peripheral vision like we did earlier on, right? And the reason I'm doing that is to bring your conscious and your unconscious minds closer together. It's easier then, it stills down the conscious mind, and it's easier for you to bring things up from your unconscious. And then I'm going to ask you to think about something you want to achieve, maybe a goal or an objective. It could be something in the next 6 months or the next year or the next 3 years or, the next 5 years, something like that. And then I'm going to ask you, as you think about that goal, do you get a picture? Now, if you don't immediately get one, as it's something you're going to do in the future, you can imagine one. That's perfectly okay. And then what I'll do is I'll run through some of these submodality qualities, right? And what I'm going to ask you to do is, it's almost like you've got the remote control, right? You can actually change the quality of the pictures to make it feel more real, to give it a little bit more substance to it. Maybe that will mean making it more colorful or more focused, or changing the spatial location, bringing it a bit closer or moving it further away or something like that. So I'm going to ask you to change some of the qualities just so you can have an experience of this for yourself, right? So that it feels more real for you. And then I'm going to ask you to let the picture go. Now, I know right now you don't know where you may do, but you probably don't know where your future timeline is. But what I'll suggest is that your unconscious mind does, and that your unconscious mind can drop that in the future for you. Now, That doesn't mean just because we've taken this picture and we've made it, you've played with some modalities, that it will magically happen for you. What you then need to do, as it says at the bottom, is you need to take action in your life which is aligned with where you want to go. The thing that we're doing by changing this picture and making it feel more appealing is it's giving you at the unconscious level just a little bit more juice to go and do the things that you want to do to achieve that goal. That's why we're doing it. Now, the other thing which I will ask you to do, which isn't on here. Now, if you're not able to do it, don't worry too much about it. But once we've changed the qualities, I'm going to ask you to step out of the picture so you can observe yourself in the picture. Now, that's the best way to hold a goal in the future for yourself, so that you see yourself there doing the thing that you're setting the goal for. Okay, so that's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'll just have a drink and give you a couple of moments to think about the thing that you want to achieve. Okay, here we go. So we're going to do peripheral vision first. So I'm going to talk you through all of this now. Okay. So first of all, what I want you to do is I want you to, like we did before, find a spot above eye level. Find a spot above eye level, and whilst you focus in on that spot, allow your awareness to spread into the periphery. So you can see things out to your left, and you can see things out to your right while you're still focused on that spot. It's almost like you've got a green tennis ball dangling behind the back of your head while you're still focusing on that spot. And as you do so, notice your level of relaxation begin to change. Now, hold that state. And as you hold that state, I want you to think about something like a goal or an objective, a milestone, something that you want to achieve in the future. And as you think about that thing that you want to achieve in the future, do you get a picture come to your mind? Now, if you find that when I ask you, you don't get a picture coming to your mind, it's okay for you to use your imagination now and create a picture of you achieving that goal, objective, or milestone. So just see if you can bring a picture into mind or create a picture of yourself achieving that in the future. Now, as you hold that internal representation, that picture of yourself achieving that thing in the future, if making it more colorful makes it feel more appealing for you, make it more colorful. If making it more focused makes it more appealing, or less focused, then change the focus so it feels real and appealing for you. Play a little bit with the location, maybe bring it in a little bit closer, bring the picture in a little bit closer, makes it feel more real and appealing, then fine, then bring it in. If not, then don't do that. Play with whether it's got a frame or whether it's panoramic or it's a movie or still. Make sure any sounds that you can hear associated with the picture have the right sort of auditory qualities, the right sort of tone and pitch and volume. And then check inside about the feelings you feel about achieving this goal. Just check inside that you can feel what it feels like to achieve this goal. And then maybe turn that up. I don't know whether that's a 4, 5, or 6 on a scale of 0 to 10, but turn it up. Turn it up so you can get it up to a 7, an 8, even all the way up to a 9, or even a 10 if you can do that. So you can really feel the sense of achieving that. And now, once you've done that, what I want you to do is I want you to step out of that picture so you can now see yourself achieving that goal in the picture. Unless you could already, obviously, then you're already there. And then what I want you to do is I want you to just imagine letting that picture now go and drift out into where your future is. I know your unconscious mind knows where your future is, and your unconscious mind can place that into your future timeline at the point in the future when you're going to achieve the goal. And you may even get the sense while you're doing it of noticing how all the events between now and then and out into the future reevaluate themselves to support you achieving that goal. And then when you've done that, you can just sort of come back into the room. Okay. Jolly good. Now, we're coming up for about, welcome back in the room if you're back. Coming up for about 10 to 12 by my reckoning. So shortly I'll do some questions in a sec. I've got a couple of slides from questions I've had before, so I'm going to cover those first, and then I'll have a look at what question. Then I'll turn the slides off and have a look at what questions you guys have got as well. So just to finish off this submodality stuff, just before we do that, what this slide is about is some of the different techniques that we teach in NLP using some of this submodality stuff that I just talked about, these qualities of internal representations. Now, like to dislike is one I mentioned already. You can do it with food. You can do it with other things as well, actually. You can actually do it to improve motivation to do things and things like that. We also do, there's a couple of different techniques for changing beliefs. One thing with a belief, right? When you bring a belief into your awareness and you don't want to believe it anymore, you can just change it. You know, you don't need to do a process. Sometimes it's helpful to do a process, but you don't. You can just change it. You know, you have that power already. But there are a couple of techniques to change beliefs. One of them is a submodality technique. Another is a timeline technique. So we go through both of those on training. A swish pattern is a way of helping people to change a situation where they tend to get a minor negative state. So a minor negative state may be a little bit of irritation or frustration or intimidation or something like that. Another thing you can do is you can also change a habitual behavior. So maybe you've got a habit that you do in certain situations, you can change that as well. That's something you can do with a swish pattern. Another technique, which I've mentioned a couple, well, I've not mentioned this technique, I've talked about phobias a couple of times. And one of the things you do is you can change submodalities in that. Another thing you can do is also this fast phobia model, which is again about submodalities. What it does, it takes any internal representation that you've had from the past, which has maybe been difficult for you. Often that's what you get with phobias. And you can play that memory in a certain way. You can change the qualities of the picture. So you run it forwards in a certain way, and then you run it backwards in a certain way. That changes the qualities, and it can take the emotional charge off it. To give you an example of this, my mum's in her 80s now. So I don't think she wants to get rid of a mouse phobia, but she does have a mouse phobia. I think she regards it as being part of herself now. It's not the sort of thing she really wants to let go of. But where it comes from, because I've asked her about this, where it comes from. Now, when she was about 2, 3, not massively old, she came back into the house with her mother. Now, when they came back into the house, there were mice running around in the fireplace when they came into the house, right? Now, my mother's mother, my grandmother, screamed when she saw the mouse. Now, when she screams, she's probably doing shock and surprise. She's not really doing fear. She's like, oh, shock and surprise. I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to need to sort it out type thing. Now, my mother, because she's only small, 2, 3, at that age, your mother is this godlike figure. So my mom is looking up to her own mother, and she sees her mother doing what she thinks is fear. And she makes the association, because it's happened in the context of the mice. So mice must be the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced. Now, that's what my mom then decides. And then she faithfully acts out this mouse phobia to this day. Now, what she could do with that experience is she could run that memory in different ways. You know, you do it forwards, black and white dissociated, backwards in color, and things like that. And running that a few times takes the emotional charge off it. And that would help her to overcome her mouse phobia. Anyway, now perceptual positions, that tends to get included as a submodality technique. It's a bit of a coaching sort of thing, but you do think about it through different modalities, through visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and auditory digital. But basically what the perceptual positions is about is it's good for relationship issues. You know, it could be mother, brother, father, sister, partner, neighbor, work colleague, friend, you know, something like that. And basically, you think about that relationship from your perspective. And what I do with clients is I get them to talk about it. So tell me about the relationship from your perspective. What do you see, hear, feel, think? And then once they've done that, you can get them to move chairs. That can be useful with this technique. So if you're doing it overtly in that sense, you get them to move into a different chair. And then you'd ask them to put themselves in the shoes of the other person. So if you put yourselves in the shoes of your brother or whoever it happens to be, a friend or whoever it is, you would then say, from their perspective, as best you can, from their perspective, what you see, hear, feel, think, from their perspective. And then when you've finished with that, you move them to a third chair and you get them to be an observer looking in from the outside. So looking in from the outside of this relationship between these two brothers or these friends or whatever, what do you see, hear, feel, think? Now, doing that with somebody can help open up different ways of thinking about things. Now, it's a really simple process. Some people, that has radically changed their relationships with other people, just doing that. So that's some of the techniques that we run through on the training using some modalities. That's really what that was about, to give you a sense of that. Now, as I said, we will do question and answer. So I'll have a look if we've got any questions. So if you've got some, if you haven't typed them in already, you do have some, you can do it. I've got a couple of slides just to deal with some of the things which have been asked before, just before I turn the slides off. So, so I'll do those first. So one of them was about we get different levels of training in NLP, and obviously we offer different packages for that. It's kind of a progressive thing we do in NLP. So everything starts with NLP practitioner training. So we don't recognize anything below that, so diplomas or something that, that's just people doing just less content. So the main first level is practitioner level. And I've got another slide which shows you the detail, what's in that, because people have asked about that before. So I'll show you that in a minute. Now, the next training after that, it says NLP coach certification. Now, when I was a lad, when I first started doing NLP training, we didn't have a separate coach training. We just used to say to people, now you've done the NLP, if you want to do coaching, just put a bit of structure around that. And then people started asking for that structure. So the ABNLP, well, I'll talk about certification in a minute. So the ABNLP that I'm a trainer for, they brought in this coach training. Now, basically the coach training says, this is coaching, this isn't coaching. Here are some of the processes in coaching. Here are some of the ideas behind coaching. Let's do some practice with each other. It's that sort of thing. So that's a 2-day training. The practitioner training is need 2 hands for this. That's a 7-day training with pre-course study. So you do some study beforehand, then you get 7 days training. So I'll go through the detail in a minute. So the coach training, you can only do that if you're an NLP practitioner. Now, the bronze package is something where we give you some discount if you book both of those together. That's what that is. And then what follows on, you don't have to do the coach training to do the master practitioner. Most people do, but you don't have to. The master practitioner training then is, I've not got a separate slide on that, but basically you're going broader and deeper. So you're taking some of the practitioner content, you're taking your understanding, your ability to replicate it, your confidence in using it deeper, and we also add more content which wasn't present in the practitioner. So that's what master practitioner is. Now, if you booked all 3 of those together, the practitioner, the coach, and the master practitioner, that's what we call the gold package. Now, if you wanted to go all in, then the level after master practitioner, you have to be a master practitioner to become a trainer, to do trainers training. That's then in NLP, that's then a separate training. You can also, it's not on here, but you can also do trainers training in hypnosis as well. Now that's the platinum package. That's all of it together. That's basically what that is. Now, the slide after this one talks about what's in the practitioner training. So I'll do that in a minute. It probably should be the other way around actually, but I'll do that in a minute. This is just talking about certification. Now, one thing to appreciate in NLP and in coaching, if you're interested in that, is it's all self-regulated. So there's no overarching governmental regulation on it. It's all self-regulated. Now, NLP started in the 1970s. And it started with a couple of individuals, and then they authorized other people to train trainers. And it's developed a little bit like martial arts. And some of the early developers set up their own certifying bodies that they've trained trainers for and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how it's developed. Now, it just so happens that I did training. Most of it came from America in the first place. They're all American guys who, although some of them are training in the UK now, but it started in America. Now, So the body that I'm a trainer for is the American Board of NLP. Now, they tell me they're the biggest, most internationally recognized body, but I've got no independent way of checking that. There's not really sort of a British equivalent anyway, to be honest. The main bodies are the Society of NLP, something called INELTA, and the ABNLP. Those are the three main certifying bodies in NLP. Now, there is something in the UK called the ANLP, which is on there as well, which is the Association for NLP. That's not a certifying body. It's kind of like a trade association. So I'm a member of that too, master trainer for the ABNLP and the ABH, and Timeline Therapy Association. I'm a trainer for them as well. And obviously the coach still on there as well. Now, the ILM is it's also known as the City and Guilds, if you've heard of that, Institute of Leadership and Management. Now, we can provide a coaching which is part of the overall governmental sort of standards for education. So we can do a level 5 training in coaching and mentoring through the ILM. So we can, and basically to do that, you do the NLP practitioner and the NLP coach, and you have to do some essays and coaching work afterwards. Quite a bit of work to do in that, but we do that as well. So that's just some of the bodies that we're associated with. Just remember, though, all of NLP is self-regulated. So, you just have to, if you're looking around, you just have to check, really, is the training I'm looking at through Society of NLP, INELTA, or the ABNLP? Now, just to say, because I've been asked about this, I just got a slide on this. This is just giving you a little bit more about what we do on the practitioner training. So you do pre-course study beforehand. Now that's audio and video and some reading material, a book and a manual and that sort of thing. And there is an open book test to do, which is a sort of, it's open book. It's more a consolidation of learning sort of exercise. So you do that as well. And then on the training, and obviously in the pre-course as well, we go through sort of the history of NLP, talk about how you set goals and outcomes so that you can achieve them. We do rapport building. How do you build rapport with somebody else so you get that sense of trust in relationship? I mentioned sensory acuity. iPads is part of that. It's separate on there, but it's kind of part of sensory acuity, about observing other people, what it means, what it doesn't mean. We do quite a bit of work on language, the language of ambiguity and language of specificity. How do you listen? How do you ask questions? How do you reframe sort of thinking and ideas for people? That's all part of language. So I've gone a little bit more detail about modalities and submodalities. So all the techniques that I mentioned about submodalities, do all of those on the training. Anchoring, I've not talked about at all. That comes from Pavlovian stimulus response. Some of you may have done about Ivan Pavlov at school. He was the chap who was investigating the digestive system of dogs, as it happens. Our dogs just returned, but he was investigating the digestive system of dogs. And what he found was when he put meat down for his dogs, he would ring a bell or tuning fork to tell the dogs he put the meat down. And what he noticed, he got to the point where he could ring the bell or the tuning forks and the dogs would start salivating in anticipation of the meat, even if he hadn't put it down. Now, that's the idea of stimulus response, and NLP utilizes that. That's what behavioral psychology is based on. So this work that Pavlov did. And NLP utilizes that to help people get in positive states more easily, to get rid of minor negative states, and to help people get out of procrastination. So that's some of what you use anchoring for. But it's, as I said, it's stimulus response. Strategies is about process. So all your behavior runs in order and sequence. So we talk about that in more detail. Perceptual positions I mentioned already. And on the training, we also do some hypnosis as well. So you get certified in doing hypnosis and timeline. Now, I mentioned it a couple of times. Timeline, in fact, I've got a slide. I say people have asked about it before. So I've got a slide on that. This is the last slide, and then I'll look at what questions we've got from you guys. What timeline therapy is, as it says there, it's the second phase of development of NLP. So it came out of work that people who were doing NLP in the 1980s, some processes they observed and then put techniques around. It utilizes some of the processes that your unconscious mind does, which I talked about earlier, about it naturally suppressing, then representing memories and that sort of thing. And we use it to let go of negative emotions from the past. So it doesn't mean to say you won't feel it in the future, but you tend to do it in a more measured sort of way. You don't, the emotion doesn't spike and you don't hold on to it for so long time. It might come up, but it drops down a little bit more. And really, what negative limiting beliefs you can change with this too. Negative emotions make you do things you don't want to do in life and stop you doing things you do want to do. Now, it's very common when I do coaching work with other people to help them let go of negative emotions from the past. One of the things, I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the things I do is I'm the lead trainer for a military charity called the Warrior Program. Now, they use timeline therapy and some of the NLP techniques to do 3-day, well, they're doing them online at the minute, but they were doing 3-day seminars for veterans, serving personnel and their families. And one of the main things we do with them is let go of negative emotions from the past and change limiting beliefs. We also do the perceptual positions exercise with them as well, and do a couple of other things. Now, they've been running, I've been involved for the past 4 years with them. Now, they've been running for about 12 years or so, and they've got quite a lot of data, and they've even done a randomized control trial using doing these processes. And one of the statistics that they found is with veterans, if you take the veteran cohort, if they were capable of working, so they weren't retired, they weren't medically incapable of working or something, so they're capable of working, but they're not currently working. What they found is within 6 months of doing the program, 90% of that cohort were working. And what I said, one of the main things we do is we do timeline therapy with them on there. So again, that's something we do on the practitioner training. So that, folks, is the end of the slides. So let me just stop sharing those and I will have a little look, see what we got on our questions. So one thing which I do get asked about is the idea about doing training online. Now obviously we're beginning to get back to doing things face to face. I ran a training last week, so we're getting back to do things face to face now. Obviously during COVID, a lot of people started doing things wholly online. Now we decided not to do that simply because I don't think the quality that you get doing it online is quite the same as you get if you're doing it live. So we decided, and some of the pre-studies online anyway. So we decided not to do training online because you lose something from it. What you have to remember is it was possible to do training online before COVID, but none of the major providers, ourselves included, were doing that. We're all doing it live because live is better than doing it online. So I would really, this is what I believe anyway. I think you get much better quality of experience if you actually do a live training rather than doing it online. And that's kind of, where things are going back to now in any case. So let me just see what other questions we've got here. Somebody who's was asking just a little bit more about EQ. So let me just remind you. So EQ is emotion quotient. So it's really about emotional intelligence. So I talked a bit about this right at the beginning. EQ just stands for emotion quotient. Now, you can measure IQ. As I said, you can set people questions and kind of measure their IQ. You can kind of do the same with emotional intelligence too. You might be able to find assessments online or something where you can do that. Now, it's not something I would routinely do with people, but it's just an idea of, it's a way of measuring the level of emotional intelligence. Now, I don't know, well, I must admit with IQ, I don't know if that's something you can massively improve. I think one of the things as you get older, as your brain ages and as you get older, you need to keep yourself active so that you keep, using it, use it or lose it. So maybe you can improve your IQ, but you can certainly improve your EQ, your emotional intelligence. Okay, so another question somebody's asking is about using NLP in the workplace. So I did talk about that a little bit at the beginning. Let me just run through some more of that with you now. Specifically, areas that you can use it at work is coaching, sales, marketing. Now, what I would say overall, though, is the main thing you get out of doing it is you improve yourself and your emotional intelligence, obviously, which I was just talking about a minute ago. Emotional intelligence is one of the ways one of the benefits, that you get in the workplace. So if you sort of embrace the NLP concepts yourself in the workplace, it makes you more effective interacting with other people, managing other people, dealing with conflict, managing yourself, managing your emotional state, being able to achieve things in work. So really one of the biggest improvements and biggest benefits you get from using NLP in the workplace is just the improvement it brings to yourself and your effectiveness at work, because it improves your emotional intelligence. Somebody else is asking about next trainings. Well, what I would say, well, I've got a training coming up starting at the beginning of June I think it's the 6th of June, something like that, in Leeds. That's the next practitioner training I've got. And there's another one in London at the end of towards the end of the month. Let me actually get the date. I've got it. The 19th, I'm reliably told. It's in my diary. I am going. So the 19th of June in London. And then, I shouldn't have turned my diary. There's one in Manchester then, which starts on the 3rd of July. So those are the next 3 trainings that we got coming up. One in Leeds in June, one in London later in June, and one in Manchester in July. Now, usually what we do is we do London and Manchester about 3 times a year. We do Leeds, Bristol, Reading once a year. And we do Birmingham a couple of times a year. So we aim to get around the country doing different places. We do master practitioner only in Manchester and London. But that's when the next training is. And if you were interested in booking, obviously you could phone us up, give us a call. Numbers on the website, inspire360.co.uk. You can book online as well if you want to do that. It's quite easy. Just fill a form in online that captures all the information. And if you do want any more information, you can download a brochure, or you can email us as well, and we can provide whatever information you need. So I think actually not any other questions we've got at this time. So apart from this one, which is just come in. So somebody here is asking about energy and grounding alignment. Now, what I would say about this is, so NLP doesn't specifically talk about energy work, but the chap that I trained with, who died recently, actually, Tad James, who was the creator of timeline therapy, he died recently. Now, he was a trainer of transcendental meditation before, and he also modeled shamanistic traditions from Hawaii called Huna. So although NLP itself doesn't talk about energy and energy healing, Tad had quite a lot of knowledge about that, and he brought quite a lot of that through in his work and in his training. So he trains trainers, and I do the same now, train trainers to utilize the idea of energy. Now, in a Western sense, it's not really something which is sort of in our model of the world, although it's something which is very open in the East, although it's coming more from sort of Eastern understanding into Western thinking now. Now, it's something that we talk a little bit about. It's not, NLP doesn't really contain content on that, although certainly with trainers, I get them to make sure that they do have energy alignment, that they're conscious of where they're putting their energy within the body and how it's being projected out and that sort of thing. But we don't tend to talk about it on the practitioner, or a little bit more on the master practitioner, but it is something I have experienced myself. I'm not trained in Reiki, although I've experienced Reiki, and which is an energy healing thing, and certainly felt energy and that sort of thing. So it's something that I would say is there. NLP itself doesn't actually teach about it. It's not actually part of that content, but it's kind of part of the ethos of the school that I was taught through, if you see what I mean. Hopefully that answers your question. Now let me just check again. I don't think we've got any other questions. So here's your opportunity. If you have any more questions, please ask now. Otherwise, I'm going to thank you all for your attention today and for joining me for these couple of hours or so, however long it's been, and hopefully hear from you in the future. So thanks very much. Bye now.